Hey, and thanks for tuning in to Cheating Tales Lab. We've got another awesome story for you, and we hope you enjoy every moment. So, let's jump into the story and get things rolling. Jack Reeves fumbled with his keys, the exhaustion from his 36-hour shift making even this simple task a challenge. As the lock finally gave way, he stumbled into the quiet of his home. The silence was a stark contrast to the chaos of the emergency room he'd left behind. He leaned against the closed door, eyes shut, reliving the day's triumphs. Mrs. Johnson's heart transplant had been successful. Little Timmy would walk again after that nasty car accident. Jack allowed himself a small smile. Days like these made the long hours worth it. Opening his eyes, he surveyed the dim entryway. His gaze fell on his daughter's backpack, carelessly tossed on the floor. A fond sigh escaped his lips. "Emily," he muttered, shaking his head, "when will you learn to hang this up?" He bent to pick up the bag, wincing as his back protested the movement. As he lifted it, intending to hang it on its designated hook, a small leather-bound book slipped out and hit the floor with a soft thud. Jack froze, recognizing it instantly. Emily's diary. He stared at it, warring with himself. The scout law, ingrained in him since childhood, echoed in his mind. Trustworthy. Loyal. "I shouldn't," he whispered to the empty house. Yet even as the words left his mouth, his hand was reaching for the book. Something nagged at him, a feeling he couldn't quite place. Call it doctor's intuition, but something felt off. With trembling fingers, he flipped open the diary. His eyes scanned the pages, not really reading at first, just taking in his daughter's neat handwriting. Then, a phrase caught his attention, making his blood run cold. "And then second dad took me to the science fair. He was so proud when I won first place. I wish dad could have been there, but I know the hospital keeps him busy." Jack read the passage again and again. Each time, the words "second dad" seemed to grow larger, mocking him. "What the hell?" he muttered, his voice barely audible. His mind raced, flipping through possibilities. A grandfather? An uncle? But no, Emily would have used those terms. This was something else. Something deliberate. He turned more pages, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. More references to this mysterious figure leapt out at him. "Second dad helped me with my math homework. Second dad took me for ice cream after my dentist appointment." Jack's hands were shaking now, a cold sweat breaking out on his forehead. How long had this been going on? How had he not noticed? The sound of a car pulling into the driveway snapped him back to reality. He snapped the diary shut, his decision made. No more secrets. No more lies. It was time for answers. Sarah's key turned in the lock, and Jack straightened, squaring his shoulders. The diary felt heavy in his hand, a damning piece of evidence. The door swung open, and Sarah walked in, her face brightening at the sight of him. "Jack, you're home early," her smile faltered as she took in his expression, her eyes flicking to the diary in his hand. The color drained from her face. "We need to talk," Jack said, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. Sarah's bag slipped from her shoulder, hitting the floor with a thud. "Jack, I can explain." "Can you?" Jack cut her off, his tone eerily calm. He held up the diary. "Who is second dad? Sarah?" Sarah's mouth opened and closed, no sound coming out. She looked like a fish out of water, gasping for air. "What I think," Jack continued, his calm exterior belying the turmoil within, "is that my daughter has been calling another man dad behind my back. What I think is that my wife has been lying to me. Am I wrong, Sarah?" Sarah's shoulders slumped, defeat written in every line of her body. "His name is Alan," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Dr. Alan Blackwood. He was my professor in college." Jack felt as if he'd been punched in the gut. The room spun around him, and he had to lean against the wall to steady himself. "How long?" he managed to ask, dreading the answer. Sarah's eyes met his, filled with a mixture of guilt and defiance. 10 years. The words hit Jack like a physical blow. A decade. A whole decade of lies and betrayal. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. What could he possibly say in the face of such a betrayal? Sarah took a step toward him, her hand outstretched. Jack, please, let me explain. It's not what you think. Jack jerked away from her touch as if it burned. Not what I think, he spat, his calm finally cracking. What exactly am I supposed to think, Sarah? That you've been having an innocent tea party with your old professor for the last 10 years? That you just happened to forget to mention it? Sarah flinched at his words. I never meant for it to go this far. It just happened. Happened. Jack's laugh was bitter. Things like this don't just happen, Sarah. You made a choice. Every time you met him, every time you lied to me, every time you let our daughter call him Dad, you made a choice. The sound of the front door opening again cut through the tension. Margaret, Jack's mother, walked in, her arms full of groceries. Her smile froze as she took in the scene before her. Jack? Sarah? What's going on? Margaret asked, her eyes darting between them. Jack turned to his mother, ready to explain, when he caught the flicker of guilt that crossed her face. His eyes narrowed. You knew, he said, his voice filled with disbelief and anger. Margaret set the groceries down, her hands trembling slightly. Jack, please, let me explain. Explain what, Mom? Jack's voice rose, filling the small entryway. Explain that you've been covering for Sarah's affair? That you've been lying to me too? Margaret's eyes filled with tears. She nodded, unable to speak. Jack's laugh was hollow, devoid of any humor. How long have you known? I found out a few years ago, Margaret admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I kept quiet to protect the family. I thought if I ignored it, it might go away. Jack shook his head, disgust evident in his expression. Protect the family? By lying to me? By letting my daughter call another man Dad? Sarah stepped forward, reaching out to Jack again. Please, Jack, let's talk about this. I know I've made mistakes, but we can work through this. For Emily's sake, if nothing else. Jack jerked away from her touch once more. Mistakes? A decade-long affair isn't a mistake, Sarah. It's a choice. A choice you made every single day for 10 years. He turned to Margaret. And you're supposed to be my mother. How could you keep this from me? Margaret's tears were flowing freely now. I'm so sorry, Jack. I thought I was doing the right thing. I didn't want to see our family torn apart. Well, congratulations, Mom, Jack said bitterly. You've succeeded spectacularly. Our family isn't torn apart. It's obliterated. With that, he pushed past them both, heading for the stairs. He needed to be alone, to process this betrayal that seemed to infect every aspect of his life. Jack, wait. Sarah called after him. Where are you going? We need to talk about this. Jack paused on the stairs, not turning back. I'm going to check on our daughter. The one person in this house who hasn't been lying to me for years. His voice was cold, detached. Don't follow me. I can't even look at either of you right now. As he climbed the stairs, he could hear Sarah's muffled sobs and his mother's attempts at consolation. But he felt nothing. The shock was too fresh, the betrayal too deep. He didn't know if he'd ever be able to feel anything for them again. In the days that followed, Jack's world crumbled around him. He threw himself into his work, performing back-to-back surgeries with laser-like focus. The operating room became his sanctuary, the one place where the chaos in his personal life couldn't touch him. His colleagues noticed the change in him. The usual warmth in his eyes was replaced by a steely determination. His easy smile was now a line of concentration, but they attributed it to his legendary dedication, not knowing the turmoil that lay beneath the surface. Dr. Thompson, the head of surgery, stopped him in the hallway after his third consecutive shift. Jack, you've been here for 72 hours straight. Go home, get some rest. Jack's smile didn't reach his eyes as he replied, I'm fine, sir. There's always more work to be done. Dr. Thompson frowned, concern etching lines on his forehead. Jack, I admire your dedication, but you're no good to your patients if you're exhausted. Take a break. That's an order. Jack nodded, knowing he couldn't argue. But the thought of going home filled him with dread. Home was no longer a sanctuary. It was a battlefield. As he drove home, his mind wandered to the confrontations that awaited him. Sarah had been trying to corner him for days, attempting to explain, to justify her actions. But how could anyone justify a decade of lies? He pulled into the driveway, steeling himself for what was to come. As soon as he stepped through the door, Sarah was there, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. "Jack, please," she began, her voice hoarse. "We need to talk about this. I know what I did was wrong, but you have to understand. Your work, you were always at the hospital. I felt so alone." Jack's eyes were cold as he looked at her. "So you decided to sleep with your professor? To let him play daddy to our daughter? Tell me, Sarah, how exactly am I supposed to understand that?" Sarah flinched at his words. "I never meant for it to go this far. It just happened. Alan was there when you weren't. He listened, he cared, and I didn't." Jack interrupted, his voice rising. "I was saving lives, Sarah. I was working to provide for our family. And all this time, you were, what? Playing happy families with your lover?" Sarah's face crumpled. "It wasn't like that, Jack. I love you. I've always loved you. Alan he was a mistake. A horrible, terrible mistake." Jack shook his head, disgust evident in his expression. "A mistake is forgetting to buy milk, Sarah. A mistake is being late for a dinner reservation. What you did, that's not a mistake. That's a choice. A choice you made every day for 10 years. He pushed past her, heading for the stairs. He needed to see Emily, the one person in this house who hadn't betrayed him. He found Emily sitting alone in her room, her eyes red from crying. His heart broke at the sight. In all the chaos, he hadn't stopped to think how this was affecting her. "Hey, sweetheart," he said softly, sitting next to her on the bed. "How are you holding up?" Emily's lower lip trembled. "Is this my fault, Dad? Because I wrote about him in my diary?" Jack pulled her into a tight hug, his own eyes stinging with unshed tears. "No, absolutely not. None of this is your fault, Emily. You hear me? This is about choices that adults made, not you." Emily clung to him, her small body shaking with sobs. "I'm sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to call him Dad," he said. "He said it would make Mom happy." Jack's jaw clenched at her words, but he kept his voice gentle. "You have nothing to be sorry for, Emily. You did nothing wrong. The adults in your life, we're the ones who messed up. But I promise you, we're going to fix this. Somehow." As Emily's sobs subsided, Jack felt a renewed sense of determination. He would get through this, for her sake if nothing else. He might not know what the future held, but he knew one thing for certain. He would do whatever it took to protect his daughter from the fallout of this betrayal. That evening, as Jack sat in his study, trying to make sense of the chaos his life had become, his phone rang. He didn't recognize the number, but something told him to answer. "Hello? Jack? This is Alan Blackwood." Jack's grip on the phone tightened, his knuckles turning white. The voice on the other end was smooth, almost condescending. It took every ounce of Jack's self-control not to hang up immediately. "What do you want?" he managed to grit out. "I think it's time we discuss this situation like gentlemen, don't you?" Blackwood's tone was infuriatingly calm, as if they were discussing nothing more consequential than the weather. Jack's jaw clenched so hard he thought his teeth might crack. "Fine," he spat out. "Name the time and place." As he hung up, Jack's mind was already formulating a plan. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Blackwood might think he had the upper hand, but Jack was just getting started. He would protect his daughter, salvage what was left of his family, and make sure Blackwood paid for his part in this betrayal. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges he never thought he'd have to face. But Jack Reeves was no stranger to adversity. He'd fought to save lives in the operating room, against impossible odds. Now, he would fight for his family, for his daughter, for his very sense of self. As he looked out the window at the setting sun, Jack felt a strange calm settle over him. The storm of emotions that had been raging inside him for days quieted, replaced by a steely resolve. Whatever came next, he would face it head-on. He was Dr. Jack Reeves, and he didn't back down from a fight. The ambulance sirens pierced the night, their urgent wails growing louder as they approached County General Hospital. Dr. Jack Reeves stood at the emergency room entrance, his face a mask of determination. The call had come in 15 minutes ago, A devastating multi-car pileup on the highway. Multiple critical injuries. All hands on deck. As the first ambulance screeched to a halt, Jack's mind snapped into focus. The chaos of his personal life faded into the background. Here, in this moment, he was Dr. Reeves, trauma surgeon. Nothing else mattered. What have we got? Jack barked as the EMTs rushed the first stretcher towards him. Male, mid-30s, severe head trauma and possible internal bleeding. One of the EMTs rattled off. BP's dropping fast. Jack's hands were already moving, assessing the patient as they wheeled him inside. Get him 2 or 3. Page Dr. Sanderson for neuroconsult. Move. For the next several hours, Jack was a whirlwind of activity. He moved from one critical patient to another, barking orders, performing intricate surgeries, making split-second decisions that meant the difference between life and death. In or two, elbow deep in a patient's chest cavity, Jack felt a bead of sweat trickle down his forehead. Suction, he commanded, his voice steady despite the tension in the room. We've got a bleeder here. As he worked to repair the torn aorta, Jack's mind flashed briefly to Sarah, to the betrayal that had shattered his world. He pushed the thought away, focusing on the task at hand. He couldn't save his marriage, but he could save this life. Hours blended together as Jack moved from one emergency to the next. He was vaguely aware of the nurses murmuring in awe at his stamina, his laser-like focus. Let them talk. This was what he was born to do. As the crisis began to subside, Jack stepped out of the OR, peeling off his bloody gloves. He rolled his shoulders, feeling the ache of exhaustion setting in. But there was no time to rest. More patients needed him. He was heading towards the next, or when he spotted a familiar figure in the hallway. His steps faltered as he recognized Dr. Alan Blackwood, the man who had been playing second dad to his daughter for years. Blackwood was standing with another doctor, engaged in what appeared to be a casual conversation. As if he hadn't torn apart a family. As if he had every right to be here. Their eyes met across the bustling ER. Blackwood's lips curled into a smirk, a look of smug superiority that made Jack's blood boil. Jack's hands clenched at his sides, the urge to wipe that smirk off Blackwood's face with his fist nearly overwhelming. For a moment, Jack saw red. He imagined striding across the room, grabbing Blackwood by his expensive collar, and slamming him against the wall. He could almost feel the satisfying crunch of the man's nose breaking under his fist. But then a nurse's voice cut through his violent fantasy. Dr. Reeves, we need you in or 4. It's critical. Jack blinked, the red haze receding. He took a deep breath, unclenching his fists. With a last, cold look at Blackwood, he turned and strode towards or 4. He had lives to save. Blackwood could wait. As Jack scrubbed in for yet another surgery, he forced himself to focus. Push away the anger, the betrayal, the hurt. Channel it all into saving lives. That's what he did best. That's what he could control. Hours later, as the sun began to peek over the horizon, Jack finally emerged from the OR. The crisis was over. They had lost 2 patients, but saved many more. It was a victory, albeit a bittersweet one. As he headed towards the locker room, dead on his feet, a voice called out to him. Dr. Reeves? A word, please. Jack turned to see Dr. Harrison, the hospital administrator, beckoning him into his office. With a weary nod, Jack followed him in. Remarkable work tonight, Jack, Dr. Harrison began, his tone grave despite the praise. You saved a lot of lives. Just doing my job, Jack replied, too tired for false modesty. About that, Dr. Harrison continued, his expression turning grim. I'm afraid I have some bad news. The board has decided that due to budget cuts, we need to eliminate one senior surgeon position. Jack felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. After everything he'd been through, after the hell of the past few days, now this? I see, he said, his voice carefully neutral. And I suppose I'm on the chopping block? Dr. Harrison spread his hands in a helpless gesture. Nothing's been decided yet, but I wanted to give you a heads up. The board will be reviewing all senior staff over the next week. I suggest you prepare to defend your position. Jack nodded, his mind already racing. He'd have to fight to keep his job, all while his personal life was in shambles. But he was Dr. Jack Reeves. He didn't back down from a fight. "Thank you for letting me know," he said, standing up. "If there's nothing else?" As he left Dr. Harrison's office, Jack's exhaustion was tinged with a new determination. He'd been backed into a corner, both personally and professionally. But he wasn't going down without a fight. Not by a long shot. The park was quiet in the early evening, the fading sunlight casting long shadows across the carefully manicured lawns. Jack Reeves sat on a bench, his posture rigid, eyes scanning the path. He checked his watch for the third time in as many minutes. Blackwood was late. Typical. As if summoned by Jack's impatience, a figure appeared on the path. Dr. Alan Blackwood strolled towards the bench, his silver hair catching the last rays of sunlight. His walk was unhurried, almost leisurely, as if he were out for an evening constitutional rather than a confrontation. Jack's jaw clenched as Blackwood approached. The man's casual demeanor, his air of smug superiority, made Jack's blood boil. But he forced himself to remain seated, to maintain his outward calm. He wouldn't give Blackwood the satisfaction of seeing him lose control. "Jack, my boy," Blackwood said as he reached the bench, his tone infuriatingly patronizing. "So good of you to meet me here. Lovely evening, isn't it?" Jack didn't respond, merely gestured for Blackwood to sit. The older man lowered himself onto the bench, arranging his expensive coat around him with fastidious care. "Now then," Blackwood began, a condescending smile playing on his lips. "I think it's time we discuss this situation like gentlemen. Don't you agree?" Jack remained silent, his eyes fixed on Blackwood's face. Let the bastard talk. Let him dig his own grave. Blackwood, seemingly unperturbed by Jack's silence, continued. "I understand you're upset. It's a natural reaction. But I think, if you look at this objectively, you'll see that there's a way for all of us to benefit from this situation." Jack's eyebrow raised slightly, the only outward sign of his incredulity. Benefit? From his wife's infidelity? From the betrayal of his family? He was curious to see how Blackwood would spin this. "You see," Blackwood went on, warming to his theme, "Sarah and Emily, they need me. I've been a part of their lives for so long now. And you, Jack, well, let's be honest. Your work keeps you away so much. They need a stable presence in their lives." Jack's hands clenched into fists, his knuckles white with the effort of restraining himself. "But still," he said nothing. "What I'm proposing," Blackwood said, leaning in conspiratorially, "is an arrangement. I continue to see Sarah and Emily. I can be there for them when you can't. Think of it as a support system. For your family." The audacity of the suggestion nearly took Jack's breath away. For a moment, he was speechless with rage. But then, something shifted inside him. A cold, clear anger replaced the hot fury that had been burning in his chest. When Jack finally spoke, his voice was soft, but there was steel beneath the quiet tone. "An arrangement," he repeated, as if tasting the word. "That's an interesting proposal, Alan. May I call you Alan?" Blackwood nodded, a look of relief crossing his face. He clearly thought Jack was coming around to his way of thinking. "Let me counter with an arrangement of my own," Jack continued, his voice still dangerously soft. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to walk away. From Sarah, from Emily, from my family. You're going to disappear from our lives so completely it'll be like you never existed." Blackwood's smug smile faltered. "Now, Jack, be reasonable." "I'm not finished," Jack cut him off, his tone brooking no argument. "If you don't, I will destroy you. I will report you to the University Ethics Board. I will provide evidence of your inappropriate relationship with a student. Yes, Alan, I have evidence. And I will ensure that your academic career ends in disgrace." The color drained from Blackwood's face as Jack laid out his plan in excruciating detail. The older man's arrogance crumbled, replaced by a look of dawning horror as he realized the precariousness of his position. "You can't," Blackwood began, but Jack cut him off again. "I can, and I will. Unless you do exactly as I say." Blackwood's mouth opened and closed, no sound coming out. He looked like a fish out of water, gasping for air. But what about Sarah? What about Emily?" Blackwood finally managed to sputter. "They need me." Jack stood up, looming over the seated man. What they need, he said, his voice cold, is for you to disappear. You've done enough damage. It's time for you to go. With that, Jack turned and walked away, leaving Blackwood sputtering threats and pleas behind him. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. He knew he'd won this round. As he strode out of the park, Jack felt a weight lift from his shoulders. For the first time since discovering Sarah's betrayal, he felt in control. Blackwood had thought he held all the cards, but Jack had just shown him how wrong he was. Now, it was time to turn his attention to the next battle. His job at the hospital was on the line, and he'd be damned if he was going to lose that too. With renewed determination, Jack headed home to prepare for the fight ahead. The conference room was silent as Jack Reeves stepped up to the podium. The review board members sat in a semicircle before him, their faces impassive. Jack could feel the weight of their scrutiny, the unspoken pressure of what was at stake. He took a deep breath, centering himself. He'd spent the last week preparing for this moment, poring over hospital records, analyzing efficiency reports, crafting a plan that would not only save his job but revolutionize the ER. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, Jack began, his voice steady and confident. I stand before you today not just to defend my position, but to present a vision for the future of our emergency room. As Jack launched into his presentation, he could see the board members' expressions shift from polite interest to genuine engagement. He laid out his comprehensive plan to improve ER efficiency and reduce costs, his words painting a picture of a streamlined, cutting-edge emergency department that would set new standards in patient care. By implementing these changes, Jack continued, clicking through his meticulously prepared slides, we can reduce wait times by 30%, increase patient satisfaction by 25%, and most importantly, save more lives. He saw Dr. Harrison, the hospital administrator, lean forward, his brow furrowed in concentration. The other board members were scribbling notes, nodding along with Jack's points. As Jack neared the end of his presentation, he felt a surge of confidence. He'd given them something to think about, something that went beyond simply justifying his own position. He was offering them a way to transform the entire emergency department. In conclusion, Jack said, his voice ringing with conviction, I believe that by adopting these measures, we can not only weather the current budget crisis but emerge stronger, more efficient, and better equipped to serve our community. Thank you. As Jack finished speaking, a murmur of discussion broke out among the board members. Dr. Harrison opened his mouth, presumably to begin the questioning phase of the review, when suddenly, a shrill alarm cut through the air. Code blue in the ER. A voice announced over the intercom. Code blue in the ER. Without hesitation, Jack turned to the board. I apologize, but I'm needed downstairs. Lives are at stake. Before anyone could object, Jack was out the door, racing towards the emergency room. As he ran, he could hear footsteps behind him. The board members were following. Jack burst into the ER to find chaos. A patient on a gurney was convulsing, surrounded by frantic nurses. What's the situation? Jack barked, already moving towards the patient. Male, 50s, cardiac arrest, a nurse reported. We've been doing CPR for 10 minutes. No response. Jack's mind kicked into high gear, assessing the situation in seconds. Get me the defibrillator, he ordered, already starting chest compressions. Push one of AP. As he worked, Jack was vaguely aware of the board members watching from the doorway, but his focus was entirely on the patient. Nothing else mattered. Clear. Jack called, applying the defibrillator paddles. The patient's body jerked with the shock, but the heart monitor continued its ominous flat line. Again, Jack commanded, resuming compressions. Come on, don't give up on me now. Minutes ticked by, feeling like hours. Jack's arms ached from the constant compressions, sweat beading on his forehead. But he didn't stop. He couldn't stop. Clear, he called again, delivering another shock. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, miraculously, a beep. Then another. The heart monitor sprang to life, showing a weak but steady rhythm. We've got a pulse, Jack announced, his voice hoarse with exertion and relief. Get him to the ICU, Stat. As the nurses wheeled the patient away, Jack finally allowed himself to breathe. He turned to find the entire review board staring at him, their expressions a mix of awe and respect. Dr. Harrison stepped forward, a smile breaking across his usually stern face. "Dr. Reeves," he said, "I think we've seen all we need to see. Your position is safe. In fact, if you're amenable, we'd like to offer you the position of head of emergency surgery." Jack blinked, the words taking a moment to register through his post-adrenaline haze. Thank you, sir," he managed to say. "I'd be honored." As the news spread through the hospital, Jack found himself surrounded by congratulating colleagues. Nurses patted him on the back. Fellow doctors shook his hand. In that moment, Jack felt a surge of pride and accomplishment that he hadn't experienced in a long time. But even as he accepted the congratulations, a part of Jack's mind was already moving forward. He had secured his professional future, yes, but there was still work to be done. His personal life was still in shambles, and he had no intention of letting Blackwood or Sarah off the hook. As he headed to his office to change out of his sweat-soaked scrubs, Jack's mind was already formulating his next move. He had won this battle, but the war was far from over, and Jack Reeves was just getting started. Jack Reeves sat in his dimly lit study, surrounded by stacks of papers and file folders. The soft glow of his laptop screen illuminated his face, casting shadows that accentuated the lines of exhaustion etched there. He rubbed his eyes, bleary from hours of poring over financial records and emails. It had been 3 weeks since his confrontation with Blackwood in the park. 3 weeks of sleepless nights and caffeine-fueled days. But Jack was nothing if not methodical. He would build his case brick by brick, leaving no stone unturned. He reached for his phone, dialing a number he'd come to know by heart. "Daniel's Investigations," a gruff voice answered on the second ring. "It's Reeves," Jack said, his voice low. "Any updates?" "Yeah, Doc. Got some juicy stuff for you. Your wife and the professor met again yesterday. Got it all on camera this time." Jack's jaw clenched. Even after everything, even after he'd made it clear to Blackwood to stay away, they were still seeing each other. "Send me everything," he said, his tone clipped. As he hung up, Jack's eyes fell on a framed photo on his desk. It was from happier times. Him, Sarah, and Emily at the beach, all smiles and sunburned noses. He turned the frame face down with a heavy sigh. Turning back to his laptop, Jack pulled up the financial records he'd been combing through. Credit card statements, bank transfers, even receipts Sarah had carelessly left lying around. It was all there in black and white, years of misused family funds, funneled into supporting her affair with Blackwood. A hotel room here, an expensive dinner there. Gifts that Jack now realized were never for him. It made him sick to his stomach. But it wasn't just about the money. Jack had been reaching out to Blackwood's former students, carefully and discreetly. The pattern that emerged was disturbing. Blackwood had a history of inappropriate relationships with students, stretching back years. He'd just been clever enough to keep it quiet. Until now. A knock at the study door startled Jack from his thoughts. "Come in," he called, hastily minimizing the windows on his screen. Emily poked her head in, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. "Dad, can I talk to you?" Jack's heart clenched. In his laser focus on building his case, had he been neglecting his daughter? "Of course, sweetheart. Come here." Emily shuffled in, curling up in the armchair across from Jack's desk. She looked small, vulnerable. Jack waited patiently for her to speak. Is Mom coming back?" Emily finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack sighed. How could he explain this to a child? "I don't know, Emily. Your mom and we have a lot to work through." Emily nodded, picking at a loose thread on her pajama sleeve. And Dr. Blackwood? Is he going to be my dad now?" The question hit Jack like a physical blow. He was around the desk in an instant, kneeling in front of Emily and taking her small hands in his. "Listen to me, Emily. I am your dad. The only dad you need. No one, not Dr. Blackwood, not anyone, is ever going to change that. Do you understand?" Emily nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. Jack pulled her into a tight hug, his own eyes stinging. As he held his daughter, he felt his resolve harden. He would see this through, not just for himself, but for Emily. Later that night, after Emily had gone to bed, Jack found himself staring at his phone again. He scrolled through his contacts, finger hovering over a name he hadn't called in years. Mike Hawkins, his oldest friend, a detective with the police department. Before he could talk himself out of it, Jack hit the call button. Jack? Mike's voice was surprised but warm. It's been a while, buddy. Everything okay? Jack took a deep breath. Mike, I need your help. And I need a friend. Over the next hour, Jack poured out the whole sordid story. The affair, the betrayal, the evidence he'd been gathering. Mike listened in silence, only occasionally asking for clarification. When Jack finally finished, there was a long pause on the other end of the line. Jesus, Jack, Mike finally said. I had no idea. Why didn't you call me sooner? I don't know, Jack admitted. Pride, maybe. Shame. I needed to handle it on my own. Well, you're not alone anymore, Mike said firmly. Listen, what you're doing, building this case, it's smart, but you need to be careful. This Blackwood guy sounds like a real piece of work, and if he's as connected as you say, he could be dangerous. Jack nodded, even though Mike couldn't see him. I know. That's why I called you. I need advice, Mike. Legal advice, sure, but I also need to know I'm not crazy, that I'm doing the right thing here. You're not crazy, Jack, Mike assured him. And from where I'm sitting, you're handling this about as well as anyone could. But listen, you need to be prepared for how ugly this could get. Are you sure you want to go through with this? Jack's eyes fell on the face-down photo frame. For a moment, he saw Emily's tear-stained face in his mind. His jaw set. I'm sure, he said. I have to see this through. For Emily's sake, if nothing else. All right, Mike said. Then let's do this right. Here's what you need to do. As Mike laid out a plan of action, Jack felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He wasn't alone in this fight anymore. And with Mike's help, he would make sure that Blackwood and Sarah faced the consequences of their actions. The game was far from over, but Jack Reeves was finally ready to make his move. The conference room at the Hilton was uncomfortably quiet. Jack Reeves sat at the head of the long table, his face an impassive mask. To his right sat Mike Hawkins, a thick folder in front of him. Across from them, Sarah fidgeted nervously, her eyes darting between Jack and the door. The tension in the room ratcheted up a notch as the door opened. Alan Blackwood strode in, his silver hair immaculately styled, a confident smile on his face. That smile faltered as he took in the scene before him. What's going on here? Blackwood demanded, his eyes narrowing as he spotted Mike. Who's this? Please, have a seat, Alan, Jack said, his voice eerily calm. All will be explained shortly. As if on cue, the door opened again. A distinguished-looking man in his 60s entered, followed by a woman about Blackwood's age and a sharp-eyed man in an expensive suit. Dean Hartley, Jack said, nodding to the older man. Mrs. Blackwood, Mr. Thompson. Thank you all for coming. Please, be seated. Blackwood's face had gone pale. Jack, what is the meaning of this? He sputtered. Jack leaned forward, his hands clasped on the table. We're here to work things out, Alan. Isn't that what you wanted? To discuss our arrangement? Sarah's head snapped up at that, her eyes wide with panic. Alan, what is he talking about? Jack didn't give Blackwood a chance to respond. Let me explain, he said, his voice carrying clearly through the room. For the past decade, my wife Sarah has been carrying on an affair with Dr. Blackwood here. An affair that began when Sarah was his student. Dean Hartley's bushy eyebrows shot up. Mrs. Blackwood let out a small gasp. That's preposterous, Blackwood blustered. You have no proof. Oh, but I do. Jack cut him off smoothly. He nodded to Mike, who began laying out photos on the table. Photos of Sarah and Blackwood together, in various compromising positions. Hotel receipts, bank statements, financial records showing how my wife has been funneling our family's money to support this affair, Jack continued, his voice never rising above a conversational tone, and statements from several of Dr. Blackwood's former students, detailing a pattern of inappropriate relationships stretching back years. The color had drained from Blackwood's face. Sarah was openly weeping now, her head in her hands. This is a setup, Blackwood tried, but his voice lacked conviction. Is it? Jack asked mildly. He turned to Dean Hartley. Dean, I believe you'll find all the evidence you need here to conduct a full ethics inquiry. Mr. Thompson can advise you on the legal implications. The lawyer nodded, already leafing through the documents with a grim expression. Alan, Mrs. Blackwood spoke up, her voice trembling. Is this true? All of it? Blackwood opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. Margaret, I can explain. But Jack wasn't done. Oh, there's more, he said, his eyes glinting. Sarah, would you like to explain to everyone how you've been embezzling funds from your research grant to pay for your little rendezvous? Sarah's head snapped up, her tear-streaked face a mask of horror. Jack, please, she begged. Don't do this. Do what, Sarah? Jack asked, his calm facade finally cracking. Tell the truth? Isn't that what you should have done years ago? The room descended into chaos. Blackwood and Sarah began shouting accusations at each other, their masks of civility finally shattering. Mrs. Blackwood dissolved into tears. Dean Hartley and Mr. Thompson huddled together, speaking in urgent whispers as they pored over the evidence. Through it all, Jack sat silent, watching the destruction he'd wrought. He felt no joy, no satisfaction, just a bone-deep weariness and a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, this nightmare was finally coming to an end. As the shouting reached a fever pitch, Mike leaned over to Jack. You okay, buddy? He asked quietly. Jack nodded, his eyes never leaving the scene before him. I will be, he said. Let's finish this. With that, Jack stood, silencing the room with his presence. I think we're done here, he said, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife. Dean Hartley, Mr. Thompson, I trust you have what you need. Mrs. Blackwood, I'm sorry you had to find out this way. Sarah, he paused, meeting his wife's tear-filled eyes. I'll have my lawyer contact you about the divorce proceedings. Without another word, Jack turned and walked out of the room, Mike close behind him. As the door closed, he could hear the chaos erupting again behind him. But for the first time in months, Jack felt a sense of peace. The trap had been sprung. Now, all that was left was to deal with the aftermath. The university auditorium was packed, a low murmur of voices filling the air. At the front, a panel of stern-faced administrators sat behind a long table, and in the center, looking small and defeated, sat Dr. Alan Blackwood. Jack Reeves watched from the back of the room, his face impassive. He debated whether to attend this ethics inquiry at all, but in the end, he felt he needed to see it through. To witness the final act of this sordid drama, the head of the ethics committee, a severe-looking woman with steel-gray hair, called the room to order. Dr. Blackwood, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the hushed auditorium. You stand accused of multiple ethical violations, including inappropriate relationships with students and misuse of university resources. How do you plead? Blackwood, his once proud shoulders now slumped, barely raised his head. I cannot deny the charges, he said, his voice barely audible. A collective gasp went through the room. Jack felt a grim satisfaction. Blackwood had finally run out of lies. What followed was a thorough and damning presentation of evidence. Emails, witness statements, financial records. With each new revelation, Blackwood seemed to shrink further into himself. When it was over, the verdict was swift and unequivocal. Blackwood's tenure was revoked. His academic career lay in tatters. As security escorted him from the room, his eyes met Jack's for a brief moment. There was no anger there, no defiance, just a haunted, empty look that almost made Jack pity him. Almost. As Jack left the auditorium, his phone buzzed. A text from Mike. It's done. Sarah's out. Jack allowed himself a small smile. Sarah's own ethics inquiry at her research institute had concluded. Like Blackwood, she'd been found guilty of ethical violations and financial misconduct. Her career as a researcher was over. The next few weeks passed in a blur of legal meetings and court appearances. Jack's lawyer, armed with the mountain of evidence he'd gathered, presented an ironclad case for divorce. Sarah, her fight gone, barely contested it. The final hearing was mercifully brief. As the judge delivered her ruling, Jack felt a weight he'd been carrying for months finally lift from his shoulders. In light of the evidence presented, the judge said, her tone grave, this court grants the petition for divorce. Furthermore, given the extent of Mrs. Reeves' infidelity and financial misconduct, the court awards full custody of the minor child, Emily Reeves, to Dr. Jack Reeves. Sarah let out a choked sob from across the courtroom, but Jack didn't look at her. His thoughts were only of Emily, of the future they would build together. As he left the courthouse, Jack was surprised to find a small crowd of reporters waiting. Word of the scandal had spread, it seemed. "Dr. Reeves," one called out, "how do you feel about the verdict?" Jack paused, considering his words carefully. "I'm grateful that justice has been served," he said finally. "But more than that, I'm looking forward to moving on with my life and focusing on what really matters, my daughter." Another reporter pushed forward. "There are rumors that the hospital wants you to join their ethics committee. Any comment?" Jack blinked, taken aback. This was the first he'd heard of it. But as he thought about it, a slow smile spread across his face. "If that's true," he said, "I'd be honored. After everything that's happened, I think ensuring ethical behavior in our institutions is more important than ever." As the reporters clamored for more, Jack politely excused himself. He had somewhere more important to be. An hour later, Jack stood in the driveway of a modest suburban home, Emily's small hand clasped in his. A sold sign swung gently in the breeze. "Well, what do you think?" Jack asked, looking down at his daughter. "Is this going to be a good new home for us?" Emily looked up at him, a tentative smile on her face. "It's nice," she said, "but it's going to be different, isn't it? Without Mom?" Jack knelt down, bringing himself to Emily's eye level. "It is going to be different," he admitted. "But different doesn't have to mean bad. We're going to make this our home, you and me. And I promise you, Emily, I'm going to be here for you. Always." Emily's smile grew a little stronger. "I know, Dad," she said. Then, unexpectedly, she threw her arms around Jack's neck in a fierce hug. "You're the only dad I need," she whispered. Jack hugged her back just as tightly, feeling the sting of tears in his eyes. For the first time in what felt like forever, he allowed himself to feel a glimmer of hope, of healing. As they broke apart, Jack stood and ruffled Emily's hair. "Come on," he said, fishing the new house keys out of his pocket. "Let's go check out your new room." Hand in hand, father and daughter walked up the path to their new home. Behind them, the sun was setting, painting the sky in vibrant oranges and pinks. It was, Jack thought, a fitting end to this chapter of their lives. And as he opened the door to their new home, Jack Reeves felt ready, at last, to begin writing the next one.
This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy the story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.
Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
He stands a staggering 6 feet 4 inches, blonde curly hair that falls just to his shoulders and frames his face like a halo. Bright green eyes find my dull brown ones, and his gaze is penetrating, seeking out something more and setting my body on fire in the process. If just his gaze could do this to me, I wonder what the rest of him can do. A chill runs down my spine as I think of him. A smile crosses his face, and as if he were reading my mind, he slowly crosses the room to stand a mere foot away from me at the bar. Close enough to touch, yet far enough away to be respectful. His jeans and t-shirt fit him snugly, and he smells amazing, like rain and freshly chopped wood. I peer up at him from my bar stool and smile sweetly before taking a small swig of my beer. His eyes snap to my lips as they press against the bottle, and I could swear I heard him groan. I force my eyes away from his lithe form, cursing myself for caving into his rugged beauty. You don't live in this town, and not at least know of the man that stands beside me now. No, he is definitely the talk of the town 95% of the time, and 90% of that 95 is usually about something bad he'd been caught doing in the past. He doesn't talk much, but his lack of verbal communication is made up for by his tell-all eyes, which have let me see a few things that make me believe that not everything you hear is true. This place has been my home since I was 9 years old, and in those 15 years, Damian Clearwaters has become the quintessential bad boy here in Round Rock, Texas. Growing up in Williamson County, everyone knew who you were and what you were doing, so having a private life without your parents finding out wasn't necessarily an easy task, but we survived. At 9 years old, I was afraid of meeting new people and was shy to a fault. Damien Clearwaters was a quiet and sweet boy who lived in the house next to mine, and when summer officially came, I would invite him to swim in my backyard with me. June 19th came around 2 months after my move and brought his 10th birthday with it. His parents held a large party in the backyard of his house, and everyone he knew from school came, which allowed me to make new friends in preparation for the upcoming school year at Fern Bluff. On the 22nd, Damien sneaked over to my house and knocked softly on the window just after dark. This was new for us. I watched worriedly as he climbed into my room, praying he wouldn't make a sound that would alert my parents to his arrival. He closed the window and put his forehead to the glass. I had never seen Damien cry in all of the time we had played together, not even when he cut his knee open on the sidewalk. That night I hugged him as he fought back the tears silently. He filled me in on how his parents had told him his grandmother had passed away, and I held him close as long as he would let me. Just after his 13th birthday, Damien Clearwater's world was turned upside down. Damien's mother left his father while everyone was gone for their daily routines. She left a note for his father saying she was leaving them because she didn't want to be a wife and mother anymore. Instead, she wanted the exciting life she had dreamed of as a young girl, so she packed her things and headed for Houston. But things didn't quite work out that way. She made it just outside of Round Rock before being hit by an 18-wheeler whose driver had fallen asleep at the wheel. She was killed instantly. Damien's father received the call about his wife while still at work, only to return home to find her note, which ultimately broke him and drove him to drink. Following the funeral, Damien and I sat in his bedroom floor, sitting so close that our shoulders touched as I let him tell me all the good things about his mom that he could remember. Everything changed after that day. Damien's father Greg drank more than ever, and Damien's secret trips to my house increased tenfold, as did his father's anger. He silently wore the evidence of his father's mood swings, ignoring the looks of pity from teachers. By the end of the year, Damien slept on the floor next to my bed every night to get away from his father's cruel words and anger. When Damien's 14th birthday came around, he had stopped talking to everyone, including me, and started acting out against his father. He landed himself in juvenile hall more times than I can count for fighting or destruction of property. I recall one time in particular when he was put into juvenile for beating up a 17-year-old boy that had been taunting him about his mother's decision to leave his worthless shit, but couldn't even do that right. The boy ended up in the hospital with a few broken ribs and some other minor injuries, but I don't recall anyone else talking about Damien that way again, at least not out loud. Although he was wild and seemingly dangerous, his ways calmed down dramatically when his father died of alcohol poisoning the month before Damien's 19th birthday. He sold his childhood home and all of its contents before moving 2 hours away to Fort Hood for military training. After completing a 5-year tour with the Army, he returned home to Round Rock looking amazing, not that he left looking bad. He bought an old ranch house, and many of the women were swooning over his body as he repaired the old home. With the almost 2 years he's been home, his hair has grown out to the length that makes you want to dig your fingers into it and pull. The Army put some meat on his bones, making him lean but so muscular you could grate cheese on his abs, or so I've heard from local gossip going around. He was always gorgeous, and at more than one point in my childhood I was convinced we would get married and live happily ever after with 2 green-eyed boys and a sweet little girl running around our home. I thought I gave up that dream when he left, which led me to decide to attend Texas State and exclusively date a local football star that led our team on to be state champions. We planned to marry and move to Dallas, but those plans died when I caught him in bed with one of the linebackers from his team. That was definitely a surprise to say the least, but we're still good friends and I plan to attend their commitment anniversary party next month. I graduated shortly before opening my own bookstore here in town, offering new and used books to the community, where we had to drive out of town for a bookstore beforehand. My shop is decently sized, has a large selection, a small cafe, and has a window that spans the entire front of the store where I have set up a sitting nook for reading and enjoying beverages. Being the only bookstore actually in town, my shop is fairly popular, and even after being open for 3 years, I still get a solid flow of customers daily. Even with Damien back in Round Rock, I never really expected to see him face-to-face again. I was going over the list of books that had been specially ordered by customers when the bell to the door chimed and alerted me to a new customer. To say I was shocked at who was browsing the shelves of the store would be an understatement. I'm not exactly sure what I expected of our first meeting in years, but it wasn't what actually happened. Damien browsed the aisles for a good 30 minutes before bounding up to the counter with an armful of books in tow and a blank stare on his face. I skipped idle conversation and rang up his purchases before I finally broke and asked him how long he'd been back home and if he were staying. "Are you back home for good, Damien? Or just visiting?" I tried to seem friendly and smile sweetly at the beast of man before me, but his blank stare turned mean before he spoke. Do I know you? He looked for a name tag, but I wasn't wearing one. Look, just because I grew up here doesn't mean you people know me. You know what I was and what you thought of me, but you never knew me. So stop trying to pry into my life. His voice was pure acid, and I almost wanted to cry from the hatred it held, but I stood firm. Listen up, Damian Ray Clearwaters. You speak to me like that again and I'll castrate you. You understand? I think all those nights you crawled through my bedroom window to get away from your father allows me the privilege of saying that I at least knew you at one time. And just in case you're still lost on who I am, it's Gabby and I don't appreciate your tone, and I will not be spoken to like that in my own damn store. He stared at me with his mouth open, then rightfully looked ashamed as he nodded solemnly. I'm so sorry, Gabby. I didn't know it was you. My heart broke as I watched him walk out the door and disappear into the street without turning around. It was then that I knew I was still in love with the jackass that's had my heart since I was 9 years old. We haven't really spoken much since that day 2 years ago, but shortly after the incident at my store I found a beautiful leather-bound journal wrapped up on my front porch. Even though it didn't have a note of any kind, I knew exactly who it was from and cherish it as I contemplate what to fill the empty pages with one day. Even though there hasn't been much communication, there is definitely sexual tension between the two of us. Hell, the whole town wants a piece of him, and I'm not too proud to say I do too. But that's not all I want, of course. I catch brief glimpses of him in town while I'm shopping or working at my shop, and I still catch myself daydreaming about 2 miniature copies of Damien and a miniature version of myself running around us happily. I quickly chastise myself for longing after him still after all these years, even after he has pushed me away from him so many times. Which brings me to now, where I sit drinking my beer at the local bar Quinn's, and my body is literally vibrating with want for him. I watch from the corner of my eye as he summons the bartender and orders a beer. The band is a local tonight and is actually pretty decent, so I lean back against the bar as I watch them play and gather my wits and courage. I feel his eyes on me, and I know they've been on me the entire night since he walked in the door. I summon all of my courage and finish off my beer as I turn toward him. Are you just going to stare at me all night? Are you going to say something, cowboy? Because let me tell you, I'm no eye candy, but you look like you're going to pounce on me any second. So here's my question. Should I play coy and act like I don't want it, or should I just pounce your butt myself instead? I watch with an amused look as he chokes down the mouthful of beer he had just taken a drink of and coughed a few times before staring at me with shocked eyes. His mouth moves like he's trying to talk, but nothing is coming out. Before I could let myself run for the door and cry myself to sleep at home, I stand up and get real damn close to him. I run my nose along his jaw line and stop at his ear. Listen, cowboy, I'm tired of playing games, so if you want me, I'll be on the dance floor. You have 2 minutes to make up your mind before I walk out that door with your last opportunity. I hope like hell to see you out there. Then I do something that shocks even me, and I know it's a good thing I'm not ordering another beer. I graze his earlobe with my teeth and walk away before he could see the shock in my own face. I don't make it 3 steps away before I feel hands on my back, a 5 o'clock shadow rubbing against the back of my neck, and a warm, hard body pressed against me. I distinctly feel the outline of something pressing into my lower back, and by God, my body shivers in delight. Lifting my arms above me, I seek out his gorgeous long locks and dig my fingers in deep, pulling his lips closer to my skin as I dance against him. He guides my body with his hands as we dance together in perfect rhythm to the band's music that is more than long forgotten. Whiskers skirt across my shoulder and up behind my ear. My skin burns in their wake until his lips meet my ear. Let's get out of here. His voice husky and rough with want. Unable to trust my voice, I nod and allow him to lead me out of the crowded bar hand in hand. Reaching the parking lot, he leads me to his truck and stops me against it with a searing and demanding kiss that makes my core ache. 10 minutes later, and we are in his bed, hands roaming over our body and leaving trails of fire everywhere they touch. A shrill sound coming from somewhere in the room distracts me from the heavenly torture of his lips. Ignore it. They'll call back if it's important. My mind returns to mush as his fingers moved, then my cell phone ringing yet again. His forehead rests as he sighs. He grabs my phone from his bedside table and hands over the offending object. What? Ma'am, is this Gabriella Houston, the owner of Books Revisited? Yes, and who is this? Ma'am, I'm Officer Christians with the Round Rock Police Department. It seems your bookstore was vandalized and broken into just after 10 p.m. tonight. I'm going to need you to come down to your store, please, as soon as possible. Already up and getting dressed, I notice I'm putting my jeans on backwards before fixing them and hanging up the phone. Sensing the drastic change in mood, Damien dresses and ushers me to his truck, only speaking long enough to ask where we are headed. My body is broken out in a cold sweat, The bookstore is the only thing I have left of my parents, and now it has been damaged by hoodlums, no doubt. The ride to Main Street is silent and quick as Damien speeds through town to our destination. My heart stops cold in my chest as we draw closer, and I could make out the damage done to my store. The window that completely made up the storefront from floor to ceiling is busted, and what's still there is covered in graffiti. The antique wooden front door is split straight down the middle, and when I step inside, I see most of the inventory lying in the floor haphazardly. I feel lightheaded and my chest constricts painfully. I can't catch my breath and feel myself falling towards the floor but stop when caught by two strong arms before impact. I turning into his chest, let go and crying harder than I have since my parents' funeral. My body shakes like an earthquake as Damien's arm squeezes me and holds me close as he soothingly runs his fingers through my hair. I'm completely drained, emotionally and physically, by the time the police allow me to leave the scene. Damien helped to board up the front of the store with sheets of plywood and promised to help me clean up the glass and books tomorrow morning. I vaguely remember being carried to Damien's truck, only briefly waking up when Damien's arms pull me closer to his chest in his sleep. I awake to the soft snoring of the big bear next to me. The sunlight is streaming through the break in the curtains of his bedroom window, and I know instantly that there's no way I'm going back to sleep. I stretch out and think back to what was interrupted last night, and my body heats up in that familiar way almost immediately. I skim my fingers over the small chest hairs that lightly cover his muscular chest. His soft snores are replaced with a purring sound of contentment as I kiss my way up his chest and move to straddle him, all without waking him fully. I continued what was left behind last night. Hell, promise me you'll wake me up like this again sometime. I bite back a giggle. Once we were done with our lovemaking, I listen to his rapid heartbeat as we catch our breath, his fingers running through my messy hair. I feel his chest rumble with laughter, and I look up at him with a weird look. I swear to God, woman, you can wake me up any damn time if you do it just like that. The army has nothing on you with its wake-up calls. His booming laughter fills the room, and he kisses my bare shoulder. His laughter fades off as we look into each other's eyes, and I watch as a smile spreads across his face, making me smile in return. I've waited so long for that, Gabby. You have no idea. I smile as I think to myself, guess cleaning up my store will just have to wait till later. He helped me clean up my store, and we both knew it wouldn't end soon. We started dating and have enjoyed each other's company ever since. I hope we will continue together until our last breath. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
My name is Jack Taylor, and this is my story. Being married to Mira was a whirlwind. Equal parts thrilling, maddening, and heartbreaking. In our 2 years together, I never truly felt married. Sure, I felt the weight of commitment, but Mira? She seemed untethered by it. Her priorities revolved around her figure, her wardrobe, her green card, earning a master's degree, and making money. The one thing missing from her list was me. I was never more than a footnote in her grand plan. Mira is 5 feet 4 inches, with striking blonde hair, a tiny waist, flawless Middle Eastern Eurasian skin, green eyes, and a 36C frame. She radiates a raw sensuality that makes men revert to primal instincts. But for Mira, sex wasn't an expression of intimacy. It was a weapon, a tool for manipulating every man in her orbit. Do I miss her personality? Not at all. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't miss how she could set the bedroom on fire. She had an unbridled lust, a willingness to try nearly anything, and I was completely hooked. Yet, even in our most intimate moments, I never felt genuine affection or love from her. In hindsight, I can't recall her ever saying, "I love you." It simply wasn't part of her vocabulary or our so-called relationship. Looking back now, there wasn't a real relationship at all. We were just going through the motions, living in a cold, hollow facade. I had been stuck in an ice castle, too blind to see it. It took a hard wake-up call, a figurative slap to the face, to finally pull my head out of the fog. She never wanted slow, passionate love-making. She didn't want foreplay. She wanted it hard and raw. The animalistic sex was plentiful. I often longed for the emotional intimacy she denied me. Mira never gave me a hug or a cuddle. She used my body and I used hers. The difference being that I loved her. She never loved me. I was able to take care of her needs, but not a lot of her wants. I went into some serious debt trying. We ate out so much my oven was dusty. I'm a high school teacher. I make a decent living, but I'll never be rich. I did my best. There was no way I could hang with the country club set. It was not enough for her. The greedy bitch. When I met her 4 years ago, she was a nanny. I was immediately impressed with her beauty and intelligence. She was exotic and independent. I later discovered that what I thought was independence was really a manifestation of her self-centered, manipulating personality. From the beginning, she was egotistical and selfish. I always saw better in her than actually existed. I felt like a moth that was irresistibly drawn to the flame that would kill him. Don't ask me why. I should have kicked her to the curb after the first week I met her. I guess I wanted to, needed to see the good in her. Maybe I was thinking with the wrong head. I wish there had been a way for me to keep the lower half of her and get rid of rest of her. So, the obvious question is why I put up with her manipulating, callous, and deceitful ways for so long? Until recently, I never thought of myself as a chicken. Looking back, I guess I was. Somehow, I thought of my patience and tolerance as strength. I promised her father, in Turkey, that I would provide for and protect his daughter. It was important to me that I kept my word. I've always thought that he was a good and honorable man who had no idea who his daughter really is. I was raising twin sons from a previous disaster called a marriage and did not want to be divorced again. I was determined to make my train wreck of a relationship work. When I met Mira, all I wanted was a home and a woman to come home to more than anything. I guess I saw what I wanted to see until I had no choice. I don't want to argue, Jack. It's over between us. You know that, she said, as she dressed to leave our house on a recent Friday night. I need to be with my friends. You mean your boyfriend? I heard most of your conversation on the phone this morning. If he calls my house again, I will throw you and your phone out of the window. Don't get jealous. You know we can't stay together. I am not jealous. You said you wanted to pursue your own life 4 months ago. Why are you still here? You being here does not allow me to get on with my life. My patience with you is finished. I have been tested enough. Don't worry, I'll be gone soon. She looked stunning. Her full red lips, perfume, and sexy black dress left little to the imagination. She was going to meet another man and didn't care that I knew about it. I had always been gentle and kind to her, but that was about to change. His disrespect for me and my sons was intolerable. I knew that I still cared a little about her. I also knew that I had reached my limit. Mira and her boyfriend were going to find out that there would be a price to pay for their treachery and disrespect. My anger grew as I watched her. What has gotten into you? What did I do to deserve this treatment? Did you think I was going to tolerate this crap? Your social life has always been more important than your husband? I have put up with your shit for too long. You've been lying to me for a long time. I know what you've been doing. Tonight, I can't deny it anymore. You treat me and my sons like crap. You really bank on the promise I made to your father that I would protect you from harm. Somehow, my sense of honor and love for you has been turned against me. You have never helped pay a single bill. I supported you as you struggled to get your MBA and through a number of nothing jobs. Now that you've got yourself a big-time job in an investment bank, I'm not good enough for you. Is that it? I could feel my guts boiling. I hate being around your scumsucker sons. I hate it every time I see them. Every time you wrote a child support check, I wanted to puke. Now they are here, and I don't want to be their mother. Besides, you have no sophistication. You're just a simple man who wants a simple life. I need more than you can give, she said, with an indifference and coldness that could not be ignored. She really thought she was somehow superior to me. Bitch, my sons are not scumsuckers, and if you are wise, you will not call them that name again. You have 1 week from today to get your stuff out of my house. If you and your possessions are not gone at that time, I will put all of it in the garbage. After next Friday, you will not be allowed in my house. I will no longer be held captive by the promise that I made to your father. We are finished. I can't stand the sight of you. I was glad that my sons were with my sister for a couple of weeks. They didn't need to be exposed to her another second. I felt ashamed and embarrassed that I ever exposed them to the monster I was looking at. She looked shocked. She was beginning to realize that I had changed. I was not going to take care of her needs anymore. My stomach felt twisted. It felt like I had been gunshot. I hated myself for still feeling anything for her. I wanted to hurt her. At the same time, I grieved for the love that never was, except in my mind. Despite my complete hatred of what she was doing and who she really was, I felt a strange bond with her. It wasn't love. That had been dying slowly for a long time. I felt sorry for her, even though she only deserved my contempt. I truly believed she would end up the victim of her own karma. Her treachery deserved none of my sympathy. I've had enough of your disrespect. And when did you get to be the queen? I'd just like to know, why do you hate them and me so much? You think that you're superior to me, to us. In fact, you're a two-bit hooker who doesn't deserve to breathe the same air as myself or my sons, bitch. Their bitch of a mother dumped them on you, and you dumped them on me. You never have any money. You spend all of your time and income on them. I don't hate you. I don't know how I feel about you. Some part of me still cares about you. But I don't love you, Jack. I need the finer things in life. I deserve that. I never should have married a man with children. I need a man who can give me his full attention, she said, picking up her purse. The only reason I married you was to get a green card and live rent-free until I could arrange my life, and when I needed your dick or anything else, you always said yes. Sorry, dear, she said, mockingly. She had no idea that I was recording the conversation. You've got a lot of nerve calling somebody a 304. You are more of a 304 than my ex ever was. I can't remember you ever trying to be in their lives. You haven't been a wife and definitely not a mother. The days of obliging you are over. From now on, you can take care of yourself. You are as plastic as the fancy cars and restaurants that you love so much. You knew from the beginning my ex left me in a pile of debt. I pay the mortgage, buy the food and everything else. Did you never try to help me? Did you? I said, raising my voice. All you have done since I married you was spending my money. Why did you really marry me? I didn't really expect an answer. I don't have a lot of cash because I have paid your bills. You have never contributed 1 cent to this household. Have you ever been denied anything that you needed since we've been together? You have served your purpose. In a short while, I will have my green card. I have my education and now a great profession. I don't need you anymore. Sorry. I know that's cold. It's the way things are. I might miss your love making a little, but not much. He is bigger than you. She was smiling. What was that about? She was driving the nail deeper. It took all of my martial arts training not to lash out at her. I wanted to wring her neck and throw her in the street. I decided not to let her bait me. Did you ever love me? She looked at me with an evil grin, but didn't answer. I could tell she didn't want to set me off before she was ready to go. The look on her face was my answer. Then, I heard a car horn blow in front of my door. You are one sick piece of work. You're lucky I haven't thrown you in the street months ago, I said, feeling sad and exhausted. Don't wait up. I probably won't be back tonight, she said sarcastically. The doorbell rang. The son of a bitch had the nerve to come to my front door. I opened it. Is Mira here? He asked with a smirk on his face. So, you're the guy who can't control his bitch, he said, brushing past me, entering my house. Mira came downstairs and approached the door with a smug look on her face. She stood close to Max. I had found out his name was Max Brown. He was engaged to a rich, divorced woman who had 2 kids. I wondered if Mira knew that. My loving husband just threatened me. He told me I have 1 week to get out. What do you think about that, Max? She asked her date. I think I should kick his butt right now for upsetting you, he said, looking at me. I would like for you to try that, Max, preferably in front of witnesses. It would be a shame to make your fiancée a widow before she was married. It would be my pleasure to punish you in front of witnesses and teach you some respect, I said calmly, with the smile of predator stalking his kill. He had a confused look on his face. My confidence rattled his confidence. Myra's expression didn't change. She obviously already knew of Max's impending marriage. I figured they had a plan to relieve his fiancée her of her funds, another scam. Those two deserved each other. I decided to screw up their plans. Never mind him, Max. Let's go. He's had a little martial arts training and thinks he's a tough guy. Don't waste your strength on him. Besides, I want him to sit here and think about you screwing me. Another time, chicken. Another time, he said, puffing himself up. I started to tell her to stay gone. I realized I needed time to exact my revenge. A few more days were all I needed. I decided not to hurt him at that moment. He was not worth getting arrested for. Apparently, Mira didn't tell him that I am proficient in the Filipino martial art of Kali, the art of combat at close quarters. She chose to denigrate my skills. I wondered why. He was taller than me by about 4 and about 20 pounds heavier. I knew that made him feel overconfident. It was hard to resist the urge to cut him down like a tree. My day would come. He leaned toward me and whispered, "Did she tell you that I screwed her in your bed?" he said, daring me to respond. "Did the bitch make you take a number, or did you stand in line?" He moved toward me. Mira pulled him away. Lucky for him. Sooner or later, his butt was mine. I watched as his Lexus pulled away from the curb. I knew his name, address, telephone number, and place of employment. He was her supervisor at her bank. I had collected a ton of their smutty emails and had pictures of them in various compromising positions in public places. Mira liked the thrill of pretending to be his submissive hooker in public. There's no doubt in my mind, she was setting him up for the kill as she had done to me. I wondered what her father would say when he saw my pictures. I never wanted to hurt her. Her treatment of me and my sons was deliberately cruel. It was past time that I made sure she couldn't inflict any more pain on them or me. The twins were 4 years old. They could never understand why Mira didn't like them. I hated myself for exposing them to her poison as long as I did. They came to me full-time a couple of years ago when their mother dropped them off and disappeared. It was difficult to convince them. It was not their fault. Myra's refusal to spend time around them turned into a good thing. I was able to devote my time in being the best father I could. We were very close and they were the center of my life. My wife and her piece of crap boyfriend had to pay. It was not normal for me to be vindictive. I decided to allow myself to use retribution to assuage my pain. My lawyer would have the divorce papers in a few days. I knew she thought she could abuse me forever. I was glad that I had nothing worth stealing except my house, a modest mutual fund investment, and my eventual pension. I owned the house before I met her. I wanted the satisfaction of serving her before she could serve me. Strangely, I got the feeling she was in no big hurry for a divorce. Being married gave her the freedom to screw around without making any commitments. She was happy with the status quo, at least for now. Even though she would never admit it, she depended on my consistency and stability. She would leave with nothing but regrets. I knew she underestimated my resolve. My plan was in motion. The next step was a visit to the Department of Immigration and Naturalization. I had an appointment with a Ms. Saunders. When I found her cubicle, I was awestruck. She was beautiful. No, more than that, she was stunning. I was expecting an overweight, disgruntled bureaucrat. "Mr. Taylor," she said, smiling at me and extending her hand. "Please, have a seat. I understand you are here to report a case of immigration fraud. Is that right?" she said, smiling. I didn't answer at first. I was lost in her eyes. Her raven black hair and big brown eyes and radiant smile hypnotized me. My body ached from not being with a woman for a long time. If I had to order the perfect woman, it would have been her. I could feel my heart rate increase. She awakened feelings in me that I thought were dead. I struggled to focus. "I hope you don't mind me saying this, but you are much prettier than I expected." "I hope I'm not being too forward," I said, sitting down. She blushed and looked down at her desk modestly. "Thank you, Mr. Taylor. I haven't heard such a nice compliment in a good while. Let's get down to the business at hand, Mr. Taylor. Why are you here?" she said in her most professional voice. I told her the whole story. My soon-to-be ex-wife married me for the purpose of getting a green card. She never loved me and planned on dumping me when her plan was completed. The entire marriage was a sham, a fraud, and I don't want her to get away with it. "Do you have any proof of what you were saying?" I took a tape recorder out of my pocket and several pictures and emails. I played the tape. My face showed the obvious pain it caused. I don't know if I could use it in court, but it should make my point. I also have pictures of her having sex with her boyfriend in the parking lot of a restaurant and other places. They were not very discreet. She looked at the pictures with a poker face. "I think we have enough to proceed, Mr. Taylor. We'll be in touch with you," she said, standing up. "We take a very dim view of immigration fraud, especially since 9/11. Thank you for alerting this office." She sounded very professional. "Now that we have the business out of the way, would you have dinner with me tonight?" I said with pleading eyes. I could sense her ambivalence. I could see her mind appraising the situation and me. "By the way, what is your first name?" "Denise. Denise Saunders. Glad to meet you. I'm Jack." "Well, what do you say, Denise? It is not good policy to take work out of the office. I promise not to mention anything about my ex. No business tonight. I have not had a woman's company for a long, long time, especially a lady as lovely as you are. Come on. It's just dinner. Even immigration officials have to eat." I promised to be a perfect gentleman. I waited for her response and hoped for the best. After a few moments of looking at my best smile, she said okay with reservations. "Great. What time would you like me to pick you up? If you could meet me in the front of the building at 5:30, we can have an early dinner. I'll call my sitter and tell her I'll be a little late. I can't believe I'm doing this. There is something about you that I trust. I don't know why. You won't be sorry. I promise," I said, trying to control my enthusiasm. I felt like a teenager going on his first date. I had time to go home, get cleaned up, and be back in plenty of time. I realized for the first time in months, I felt good. At dinner, we spoke of many things. She loosened up after a while, and I had the feeling that we had known each other a long time. We were both happy to be in the company of each other. She told about her divorce and her 7-year-old daughter, named Hannah. We talked about her love of cooking and hiking, and I talked of my sons and my love of martial arts and motorcycles. We discovered that we were very different, yet compatible. I found myself wanting to hug her. I kept imaging her body pressed against mine with fiery passion in her eyes. She picked up on my distraction. "What are you thinking? You have such a faraway look in your eyes," she said with affection, looking at me intently. I was hoping that you were having as much fun as I am. When I look at you, I get a warm feeling. I see passion and strength in your eyes. From the first moment I saw you, I felt a connection. I feel it too. What is happening here? We just met. I don't even know you. Maybe we just better slow down. That sounds like good advice. Very logical. But I'm just going with the flow. If I get too carried away, please just tell me. I don't want to offend you or have you think I'm some kind of nut. No, actually I'm flattered. I never thought of myself as being that attractive. For the record, I think that every woman I see from this day onward will come in second to you. I couldn't shake the feeling that we had known each other before. Maybe, in a different lifetime we had been lovers. I can't believe you. Look at my face. Do I look like I'm kidding? She didn't answer. The expression on her face said she understood. How do you feel about what your wife? Soon-to-be ex-wife, I interjected. Jack, how do you feel about her betrayal and manipulation? Denise asked, changing the subject. I hesitated for a moment to collect my thoughts. My face betrayed the pain that I thought I was past. I feel sad, hurt, and angry. My ego has taken a serious beating. I never had a chance to make her happy. She wouldn't let me. I was set up from the beginning. I just can't understand her need to disrespect me. Maybe that hurts more than anything. Could be, there is nothing more to understand than what you see. She is what she is. You're a gentle, kind man. I know that in my heart. You don't deserve how she has treated you. Fortunately, Denise didn't see the other side of me. The part that I kept carefully controlled and reserved for when I needed it. What would you like to see happen to her? She married me to get a green card among other things. I think the only fitting punishment would be to make sure she gets a one-way ticket back to Istanbul and nothing in the divorce. I said, clenching my fists. Denise reached across the table and took my hands in hers. I could feel her energy and her compassion. It calmed me down. We spoke more of what to do about Mira. How did your ex-husband ever let you go? He didn't. I ran. He wanted me to be his punching bag forever. Unfortunately for him, I had other plans. When he struck Hannah, it was the last straw. I couldn't take it anymore. I left him and never looked back. That was 3 years ago. I'm glad he was such a fool. If he wasn't, we wouldn't be here and I would not be sitting here holding your hand. The thought of anyone hurting Denise enraged me. A small band started playing. They were pretty good. Would you like to dance, lady? They're playing our song. Really, what song is that? Whatever they're playing, I said, pulling her to me, beginning to sway to the music. The feeling of her pressed against me and the scent of her perfume had a strong effect on Mr. Happy. I felt her relax and melt into me. Don't worry about Mira. I'll take care of everything tomorrow, she whispered in my ear as we danced. I realized that I saw more than passion and strength in her eyes. I saw her soul and my future. We kissed with gentle passion and held each other tightly when I took Denise home. I wanted her, and I knew she wanted me. We both knew without speaking. The next time we were together we would make love. I tore myself away from her. Trying to sleep that night, I kept seeing her face and hearing her laugh. I thought, could I be in love already? I wasn't sure. All I knew was that life goes on. Self-pity and regrets are a waste of time, and I had wasted enough time. I was happy. When I returned home, Mira was in the kitchen sitting at the table. I'm glad you're here, I said, sitting across from her. Friday is your last day. I will be home by 6 p.m. Please be here. I have something important to say to you before you go. Will you do that for me? Why don't you tell me now? No, I'm tired. I'm going to bed. I will be glad to get my bed back. I've been in that guest room for too long. I should have made you sleep in the guest room. I should have done a lot of things differently. I went into the den to watch some TV. 20 minutes later, Mira was standing in the doorway wearing the black lingerie I had bought her for our second anniversary. She looked as sexy as ever. I was angry with myself when my body responded. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of knowing she still had that power over me. Jack, you can have me if you want to. It's been so long. Tomorrow, I'm walking out of your life forever. Tonight, you can take me any way you want to for old time's sake. I'm yours, she said in her most sultry voice. I know you still care for me. I see it in your face. Could we forget all of our differences and problems for one night, please? She cooed. I stood up and walked towards her, placing my hands gently on her face. She looked hopeful. I wouldn't screw you with the dog's meat, I said, pushing her face away from me. A pained and confused expression crossed her face. I would remember that look forever. Her last attempt to manipulate and use me had failed. I didn't hate her. What I felt was worse. I felt nothing, numb, empty. I just knew that I needed to get away from her. To feel anything but revulsion would be to invite more heartache. I slept restlessly that night. When the sun rose, my plan for retribution would begin. At 9 a.m., I was in my lawyer's office. Okay, Jack. I'll have your divorce documents today by 3 o'clock. What else? I want to sue Max Brown for alienation of affection or intentional infliction of emotional distress, or anything else you can think of. I want him to pay. He didn't actually cause my marriage to fall apart, but I want him to pay anyway. I also want to sue the bank for not enforcing its morals clause in Max Brown's contract. They knew he was screwing my wife and allowed it to happen. I want to serve these papers personally today at 4 p.m. Can we do this? I hope you're not planning on doing something stupid, said my lawyer. This situation might get really ugly. It is legal for you to serve the papers as long as there is a witness. I hope it does get ugly. I really do. It's better if you don't know what I'm planning, I said with a look of steel determination. I arrived at Max Brown's office at 4 o'clock. A clerk showed me where he was. I saw him leaning over a secretary, placing his face too close to hers. She was trying to put some space between him and her. He looked up in time to see me coming. As I walked towards him, I slipped into the relaxed focus that I call combat mode. Max was about to experience some serious pain. He looked worried, then defiant. What are you doing here, Taylor? He was not going to wait long to get his answer. I have some gifts for you, I said, handing him a copy of my divorce papers, naming him as the correspondent in adultery. He looked annoyed. Everyone in the office was watching. I handed him another document. This document is a lawsuit charging you with alienation of affection, causing the breakdown of my marriage. And this is a copy of my lawsuit against your bank for allowing this blatant affair to continue in full view and knowledge of your supervisors in violation of the bank's morals clause of your contract. I gave him some of the explicit pictures I had of him and Mira. Your boss really liked those pictures, I said with a smile. Is that it? He was really angry now. I could see the blood rushing to his head. He could barely contain himself. One more thing, I said, walking away from him and stopping. Your fiancée should be receiving these papers and pictures right about now by messenger service. I guess she is not too happy with you at the moment. I think she might want her car back. Who is getting screwed now, a-hole? When he started to rush towards me yelling, I'll kill you, I knew I had him where I wanted him. I smiled as he ran towards me with clenched fist. My day of retribution was at hand. The next several seconds seemed to move slowly. I waited for his attack and easily sidestepped his charge, sending 2 rapid punches to his liver, followed by a flurry of blows to his torso. Then, I drove my knee into his groin hard enough to lift him off the floor. This was followed by a slap to his ear which ruptured his eardrum. A sweeping backward movement of my leg took his legs away as a simultaneous palm strike broke his nose. He hit the floor with a thud. He wasn't dead, but I had seriously upset his day. Lucky for him, the blow to his nose was intended to break it, not drive the cartilage into his brain. I had considered that option. As the fog of battle lifted, I heard clapping. It seemed to grow louder and louder. The secretary that Max had been harassing was applauding. This was followed by more clapping. I seemed every woman in the office joined in and was happy that Max got his butt kicked. Obviously, no one was shedding any tears for him. I stood there surprised by their support. Call the police and tell them to bring an ambulance, I said to the nearest secretary. I think Max over here has a bad headache. She handed me a slip of paper with her phone number on it. She whispered, call me. The police questioned me at length. They couldn't understand how so much damage could be done to Max in less than 10 seconds. There were 15 witnesses that said I had acted in self-defense after Max attacked me, threatening to kill me. Reluctantly, they told me to go home and that they would have some questions for me later. I felt good on the drive home. One of my tormentors had been dealt with. Now, there was one to go. When I arrived home, I called Denise and asked her to meet me at home when she got off from work. Mira showed up exactly at 6 p.m. She was irate. Jack, what the hell have you done? That scene you pulled in my office was humiliating. Everyone in the office is talking about it. I'll lose my job. You almost killed Max. I never knew you could be so heartless and cruel. Cruel? You're calling me cruel? You screwed that dipshit in my bed and you're calling me cruel? You have one hell of a lot of nerve. He's damned lucky to still be breathing, I said, trying to control myself. Who is this bimbo? She inquired, finally recognizing Denise's presence. This is no bimbo as you put it. Denise is my very good friend, I said, putting my arm around Denise's waist and kissing her on her cheek. Denise works for the Department of Immigration and Naturalization. The look on Myra's face was priceless, and she began to understand something was up. Why is she here? I wanted her here to wish you a safe trip. Trip? I'm not going anywhere. "Oh yes, you are," I said, opening the front door. 3 men waited outside, 2 G-man types and a short balding fellow. They came inside and immediately the short guy asked, "Mira Taylor?" "Yes. You've been served. These papers are suing you for divorce for adultery." He turned and left. That left to 2 men. Her jaw dropped. She looked at me, then at them. She looked like she had just been sentenced to death. They showed their ID and badges and said, "We have credible information that your immigration status in this country was obtained fraudulently. Please come with us. We have a few questions we'd like to ask you." As she was being escorted out, she paused at the doorway and turned back to face me. Her green eyes searched mine, desperate, pleading. "Jack, you promised you'd never let anything happen to me," she said. Her voice a mix of defiance and desperation. I stood there for a moment, unmoved, letting the weight of her words hang in the air. Then, without a flicker of emotion, I replied, "I lied." I closed the door firmly behind her, sealing off not just the moment but the entire chapter of my life. Forever. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
Some days just don't go your way. No matter what you do or say, you wish you could just hide under the covers and avoid it all. As the head of the household, you carry a weight of responsibility, even when you wish you didn't. My day started abruptly at 7 a.m. when the police woke me up to report a break-in at my bar. Rushing out, I found my car had a flat tire, adding to the frustration of only having had 4 hours of sleep. Borrowing my wife's car, I headed to the bar, only to discover most of the liquor supply stolen, with the entrance smashed in. It looks like it'll be at least 2 weeks before we can reopen. The police labeled it as a robbery, and after the insurance agent documented the damage, I boarded up the entrance, awaiting repairs. Thankfully, insurance will cover the losses until we're back in business. Around lunchtime, as I was about to hop into my wife's car to head home, I heard someone shouting, "Melody, wait!" I turned to see a man rushing towards me, only to stop abruptly when he realized his mistake. He apologized, explaining he had the wrong car, then hurried off. Later, at home, I described the encounter to my wife, Melody, but she couldn't place the man. When she asked why I had to borrow her car earlier, I explained about the break-in at the bar and my tire trouble. After a quick sandwich, I fixed my truck's burst valve stem, then made a pit stop for jeans, t-shirts, and a MAGA hat. Returning home, I found Melody's note saying she'd gone shopping. My late shifts on Fridays and Saturdays meant I often arrived home in the morning. After 12 years, I finally shaved my beard. After showering, I got ready to leave, forgetting to brush my hair, leaving my curls wild. The change was so drastic, I almost didn't recognize myself. Despite this, I decided to explore other bars in town that night. Heading out as usual, I found Melody still absent. Sneaking into the bar through the back, I changed into my new clothes and found some reading glasses to complete my transformed appearance. With a clean shave and glasses, I looked much younger, almost like a college student. Realizing my truck was too recognizable, I called a cab to take me to National Car Rental, where I opted for a white, inconspicuous Ford. Starting from the north, I worked my way through town, observing and learning. At each stop, I studied the staff, ambiance, clientele, and prices, gathering insights for when I reopened my own establishment. Often, after getting what I needed, I'd leave without finishing my beer. It was at the 7th spot, a hangout for university students by the Mississippi River, where everything changed. Walking into New City Jack, I spotted my wife, Melody, dancing carnally with another man. Anger surged through me, especially realizing he was the same man who had called out to her at lunch. It was clear she'd been lying to me. Melody wore an eye-catching outfit, revealing plenty of cleavage. As a bartender, I knew appearances could be misleading. Seeking a place to observe, a guy offered me a seat for buying a table. Surprised, I accepted and ordered a double gin and tonic. They were regulars, explaining the busy weekends due to university students. Later, I casually asked about a woman in revealing attire. The redhead informed me she's Melody Corbett, often seen with her boss, Payne Richards. They're regulars, possibly more than friends, given Melody's complicated situation with her husband working out of town. Additionally, they often leave together before the last set of the band. I thanked the table, bought another round, then said goodnight. Outside, as I deflated her car tires, I was caught by a redhead named Carrie Ann, who worked with them. She revealed that everyone at the table did too. "How did you know who I was?" I asked. "I didn't. I could tell from your expression that you've been struggling to hide your feelings all night, despite trying not to." Your gaze lingered on her too often. It all clicked when I saw you tampering with her car. Your earlier questions made me wonder what her husband might do if he found out, Carrie explained. So here I am to find out if my suspicions are correct. You don't work on oil rigs, do you? Maybe we should talk later. I used the white Ford Taurus in the corner labeled rental. Batya Street bar is closed after being trashed this morning, I confessed. Melody thinks I'm still there. I used tonight to scope out the competition, visiting different bars. Take the keys. I don't want you involved if someone else catches me. You work at Batya's on Batya? It's got a great reputation, she noted, taking the keys and leaving. Later, I joined her in the car, relieved nobody else was around. Where to? Carrie asked. Somewhere private, I replied. This is my apartment, plus I needed a ride home, Carrie grinned. It was a 20-minute drive to her modular home outside of town, where I was surprised to see another car in the driveway. That's my car. Susan, the brunette from our group, gave me a ride. It helps fend off unwanted attention if you say you're with a friend, she explained. I texted her saying I took a cab home. It was a pristine house, barely used. She fetched us beers and we settled in for a chat. Carrie Ann, thank you for intervening. I was at a loss, I admitted. You made me realize I might have overreacted. He doesn't pay. They have a monthly room at the Ramada Inn on 4th. If you follow them, you'll see them heading there after closing, Carrie Ann divulged. She arrives in jeans and a t-shirt, but leaves in dressier attire, returning a few hours later, still in jeans. How do you know all this? I inquired. My brother manages there. He's on duty Wednesday through Sunday. They've been involved for over a year, Carrie replied. Melody told him you work on oil rigs, gone for months, implying an open relationship. Seeing my shock, she continued, You had no clue at all? No, I didn't. First, I need evidence, I stated. Second, her parents support my bar. I owe them $20,000. I'll speak with my brother, see what he can do. Maybe they have footage or she could get a key card, Carrie suggested. I'll see him next Friday at our parents' anniversary. We swapped contacts before I left. I wanted to witness their reaction to her flat tire, helping confirm Carrie's claims. I returned to the bar just before closing, relieved the parking lot was well lit before they turned off the lights. Minutes later, Melody and Payne emerged, holding hands and exchanging quick kisses. He unlocked her car door, but they noticed the flat tire. Checking, they found them all flat. Though I couldn't hear, their actions suggested a long-term relationship. Payne called for a tow, and within 20 minutes, a truck arrived to inflate the tires. They left for the Ramada Inn, confirming Carrie's tip. Later, Melody, with damp hair and a Macy's bag, returned home. It's painful to realize your spouse has betrayed you. I returned the car, took a cab to retrieve my truck, and arrived home at 5 a.m., crashing on the couch. She remained oblivious to her exposed affair. Mel and I met on a double date, and her captivating eyes drew me in instantly. Despite her father's strictness, she won me over, and I visited her every weekend against my father's wishes, slowly winning him over with persistence. She pursued college while I opted for online business courses while working. By her sophomore year, she was engaged, coinciding with the bar being put up for sale the following summer. Visiting with her father, we discussed renovating the dark, outdated bar. He agreed, lending me money from his retirement fund at a 6% interest rate and assisting in the renovation. Together, we transformed it, significantly cutting labor costs. Over a decade, I reduced the loan from $200,000 to under $20,000, doubling its worth. Melody's parents urged us to start a family, but she hesitated. I realized I wasn't deemed suitable to be a father. Quickly securing a commercial loan, I paid off her father, who, in turn, returned the final payment, having profited from selling the bar's plans. With his confirmation, I cleared the bank loan, leaving only an unsecured overdraft. Repairs and alterations were underway at my bar, yet my wife remained clueless, consumed by her own world. Friday night, disguised again, I tampered with her car's exhaust and his company car's gas tank. Inside their favorite bar, they were oblivious to everything but each other, their behavior drawing attention. Carrie Ann stayed close, offering support. I discreetly bribed the bartender for a video competition, urging discretion. He inquired about my plan. Pulling out my wallet, I whispered, "For your eyes only." After verifying my ID, he grinned, eager to assist in getting back at the cheating woman. He hinted at obtaining Spanish Fly for a special after-hours party next Saturday, aligning perfectly with the bar's reopening on Thursday. Spanish Fly, a potent aphrodisiac, was often prescribed to couples struggling with fertility. That stormy night, feigning sleep, I heard Melody return home at 3 a.m., engaging in a lengthy phone call. The next morning, I rose early and, with her unlocked phone, discovered her conversations with Payne after realizing I was home. She had forgotten to erase her messages. One message caught my attention, addressed to her older sister. "Sis, I need an alibi for last night. I'm going to say I was with you." I discreetly snapped a photo with my cell phone. Later, Melody explained she had visited her siblings. On Tuesday, Carrie Ann Lasher contacted me, suggesting a meetup at the highway truck stop. Arriving, she greeted me with a warm smile, capturing my image for her contacts. Despite my new mustache and goatee, Melody remained oblivious. "Hi, Red," I greeted her, noting her happiness. "I'm Caleb," she corrected. "You'll be happy too once you see the info my brother shared. He asks you to cover his printing costs." We ordered breakfast, me opting for eggs, sausage, and bacon. Carrie choosing a cheese omelet, both with orange juice and coffee. The info revealed Melody had her own keycard to his room for over 6 months, used regularly on Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays, and Saturdays. At 7 p.m., I showed Carrie the incriminating message from my wife. "What's your plan?" Carrie inquired. "Are you considering a divorce? There's a special party next Saturday for Melody and Payne. I hope to receive plenty of video evidence. It's going to be wild. Once I gather everything, I'll show it to her father to explain why she doesn't want my kids. Simultaneously, she'll be served with divorce papers in their hotel room, all caught on tape. When it's ready, email it to me, please." "Why?" Carrie questioned. "Payne's corporate car is totaled, and there's a foul odor coming from Carrie's car. I'd suggest to our company that an upset husband may be to blame." "When should it be sent?" I asked, masking my satisfaction. "It's quite poetic that she's being served at the same time," Carrie chuckled. "May I mention you?" I burst into laughter. "You can be quite an idiot," Carrie joined in. "And yes, you may use my name." "I executed it perfectly," I smirked. "I'll never spill the details." We arranged for medication through our doctor, and I discreetly switched her birth control pills with sugar pills, buying myself time. I had a stroke of bad luck the other night when someone ran a red light on my way to work, totaling my truck and causing a pileup. Rescuers had to use the jaws of life to free me, and I was taken to the hospital for a thorough checkup. Melody and her parents met me there, and after 6 hours of examination, I was released with instructions to rest for at least 2 days and avoid driving for a week. Melody stayed home to care for me, and by Saturday, I was eager to return to the bar. While getting ready, I overheard Melody making plans for a night out. I asked her to drop me off at the bar, pretending to check on the changes I had made. Sales doubled that night thanks to the new cook I had hired, and we were sold out for the evening. We began attracting lunch customers with our daily specials that complemented the bar's theme. The restaurant closed at 8 o'clock, offering pickled eggs or sausages afterward. An elderly gentleman, retired but restless, proposed a partnership, setting up his kitchen and demanding 10% of profits. His scratch-made dishes like shepherd's pie and Irish stew garnered rave reviews, necessitating new kitchen staff. Around 8:30, Carrie Ann Lazar entered with her friend Susan, looking stunning in Irish-themed attire. They sat at a table, enjoying the folk music and Irish standards. Carrie Ann's green ensemble drew attention, and I treated them to specialty drinks, saying, "Compliments of the house." "Hey, Caleb," Carrie Ann said. "Thanks for remembering our preferences. This is my friend Susan." I shook Susan's hand as she excused herself briefly. Opting for a ginger ale, I avoided drinking in my own bar, a promise I'd kept for a decade. Returning to the table, Carrie Ann shifted seats to sit beside me while Susan seemed unfazed. "Taking the seat early," Carrie Ann announced before others arrived. "Susan, Caleb is Melody's ex-husband." "Really?" Susan exclaimed. "Yeah, that's true," I confirmed. "When we first met, I was exploring the town while my bar was under renovation. Carrie caught me doing something I shouldn't have, and after a conversation, I ended up giving her a ride home. We've been friends ever since." "He had no clue about his wife's actions while he was at work," Carrie Ann explained. "That's why we're here today. I wanted to make sure he wasn't alone," she added. "Why choose this place?" Susan questioned. "It's known as a high-class spot." I chuckled. "I'll take that as a compliment, though it wasn't my intention when designing it. I just wanted a nice place to bring my girlfriend." "Caleb not only built this bar, he owns it," Carrie mentioned. Carrie and I exchanged a glance at Susan's surprised expression. Soon, the place filled up, and when the team arrived, our table was packed. Carrie Ann and Susan kept me on the dance floor all night, much to the delight of my staff, who noted the unusually crowded dance floor. Surprisingly, Everyone agreed the music volume was just right, loud enough to enjoy without overpowering conversation. Closing time came, and I asked Carrie Ann for a ride home, where she shared that most of the crew preferred our bar over others, as it wasn't geared towards the university singles crowd. This pleased me, as word of mouth expanded our clientele. Sunday morning, waking up to find Melody absent didn't surprise me. I spent 2 hours trying to locate her, feigning concern while calling family members, and confiding in Carrie Ann. As I was speaking with her, I received another call, this time from my father-in-law. "Hey, Dad," I greeted. "Still no word, huh?" "No, Caleb. That's why I'm calling. Mary and I decided to brunch at the Ramada Inn on 4th. Wish we hadn't. Melody's car is parked here," he revealed. "I'm stuck without my truck, Dad. Can't make it. You guys enjoy lunch. I'll catch up later," I replied, sounding concerned. My father-in-law was strict, sticking firmly to his beliefs. He saw the world in black and white, finding Anderson Cooper's truth questionable. He was surprised I lacked tattoos, but I valued self-respect. Our society, I argued, prioritized self-interest over community. We debated law and order, one side preaching responsibility, the other endorsing irresponsibility. Racist had become a political weapon, branding dissenters as enemies. I remarked, if Napoleon were alive, he'd applaud their tactics. To them and their followers, we're just a minority, too wise to adhere to their doctrines. Oppose them, and you're labeled a racist, facing molestation and attacks. Now they infiltrate democratically governed cities, masked, imposing their brand of social justice on us. They only want to hear their beliefs echoed. Though leadership promises investigations and charges, we both know it's unlikely. Equal justice is a bygone ideal. He agreed the situation will worsen before improving. It mirrors Napoleon's rise to power, a history lesson repeating itself. It's disheartening one party reintroduces such a divisive culture. These attitudes once sparked the Civil War, raising fears of a repeat. Dad, I concluded, this is our reality now. Melody's father, if he caught her with a lover, might react violently. I informed him of her secret outings, attaching evidence. Updating Carrie, she laughed, asking what I was up to. And I said, besides smiling, not much. "Want me to come get you so we can hang out?" she offered. I admitted I'd love to, but felt it's best not to vanish, given their worries. It was around 6 p.m., and as I sat in the kitchen devouring pizza, a car pulled into the driveway. Peering out, I recognized Melody's dad alone. He appeared utterly defeated. Welcoming him inside, I fetched Maker's whiskey and offered him a slice of pizza on a clean plate. "Dad, it's serious. After your call, I talked to Mandy first to confirm my suspicions," he explained. "I asked the hotel's day manager to contact the night manager early. Turns out, Melody's been having an affair for over 6 months. Mandy found out and agreed to keep it quiet, thinking Melody wanted to enjoy a wild, carefree life before settling down." I feigned shock, but partly I was genuinely surprised by Mandy's honesty. As I was leaving, Melody appeared with her lover, wearing a proud grin like he'd won a prize. I was so shocked I nearly passed out. "It took both managers to pull me away," he recounted. "I came here because I figured it'd be the last place the cops would search." "Dad, I'll call Mom first to let her know you're safe. Then I'll check with the Ramada Inn manager about pressing charges," I assured him. My mother-in-law was devastated but thanked her husband for visiting me. Melody called to apologize, but her mother wasn't having it. "Your apology means nothing," she retorted. "You've caused enough trouble already." Afterward, I called Jason Lasher to settle a $5 debt. He joked about his sister reminding me. "She never forgets," he chuckled. He suggested paying him in front of her to finally put it to rest. "Why?" I inquired. "It'll save us both a lot of trouble," he replied. "She needs to learn to let go." I assured him of my intentions, explaining I'm still married and won't make any decisions until then. "I promise to be careful," I reassured him. He then informed me that the police hadn't been called and Payne agreed not to press charges, thanks to Melody's persuasion. "Thanks, Jason," I said, relieved. I shared the good news with Dad before telling Mom, seeing the relief wash over his face. "What's your plan to fix this?" he asked, visibly concerned. I took out my phone and drafted a message for Melody. Showing it to her father, it read, "Dad just informed me of everything. Congratulations, you've successfully dismantled our family in a single day. Don't return home. The Melody I knew is gone. If you choose him over us, our marriage ends now. Otherwise, it's a slow pass away over the next 6 months." I delivered it earnestly, knowing trust once broken can't be restored. "Let's end this marriage swiftly and with dignity," he declared, sending the message. Mary always said Melody married her father. This only proved her right. After pizza and drinks, we headed to Lumberland for 3-door deadbolt locks. Soon after installation, the family arrived. Mandy's parents, Jack and Mary, along with their adorable kittens. They left around 10 o'clock. I texted Carrie Ann. "Are you awake?" She promptly called back. "Are you all right?" Jason called and filled me in, Carrie inquired. "Payne's got 2 black eyes and a broken nose. Your father-in-law gave him a punching before Jason intervened." I chuckled, replying, "He used to box amateur when he was younger." "I'd love to witness that," I remarked. "After the incident, he came here, lost. I learned from your brother that no charges were filed, so I updated the family. They had gathered to discuss the situation and had already left." "What about Melody?" Carrie inquired. I shared that my father-in-law had posed the same question. I mentioned sending Melody a message and asked him to read it, to which he responded, "Let's end this marriage with dignity," and sent it. "Your father-in-law spoke for you. Couldn't you forgive her and give her another chance?" Carrie questioned. "No. To him, she's shattered trust beyond repair. He sees things in black and white. She made her choice, and she'll have to live with it. Consequences be damned," I asserted. "I'm with him," I added. "He even helped me change the locks." "Any updates on last night?" Carrie Ann inquired. "Haven't had a chance to check. Been swamped," I chuckled. "But I suppose it doesn't matter now." "I'll stick to my promise. Give it until Monday night," Carrie assured. "From what I've gathered, it might surprise you." "Why's that?" I asked. "Word is the bartender at New City Jack has a history in certain types of videos," Carrie chuckled. "If that's true, it wouldn't shock me if he took advantage of the situation. Are you serious?" I queried. "Absolutely, Caleb, but back to business. When's our official first date? How about on the day Melody gets served?" I suggested with a grin. "I'll even arrange for her to be served at the office. Remember, you're sending red roses beforehand. I want to drive home the point that she's violated my standards of fidelity." Carrie remarked, "Tomorrow at work will be quite intriguing." After ending the call, I reflected on what I knew about Carrie Ann. She was around 24, unmarried and attractive, standing at about 5 feet 8 inches tall. While not extremely slender, she possessed a figure my grandfather would have deemed fit for starting a family. Despite working in the same regional office of the dental company as Melody and her lover, she wasn't part of the management team as far as I knew. She was discerning about who she let into her life, maintaining close ties with her family and inner circle, which included me. Enjoying dancing and drinking, she was sociable like me. However, Carrie, with her cautious nature, left me with more questions than answers. Her level of education seemed higher than her current position suggested, hinting at underlying complexities. As I prepared for bed, I hummed, "Hey Carrie Ann, what's the game anyone can play?" Anticipating the challenges of Monday, I arranged for my assistant to manage the bar until I resolved my personal matters. Mandy arrived with Jack's truck to assist in packing her sister's belongings. We stopped by a packing supplies store to ensure we did it properly, starting with the master bedroom. While I assembled and sealed boxes, Mandy began sorting through dresser drawers. "Caleb, I'm appalled by my sister's actions," Mandy expressed. "I never condoned it and stayed silent, hoping Melody would come to her senses. When Dad told me about your message, I broke down and confessed the truth. I've only been aware of it for a month. He took it as his own failure, believing he didn't raise her properly. I think Mom feels the same way." "Mandy, I'm still grappling with my emotions. The night Melody texted you, I stumbled upon it accidentally. I was at the bar merely scouting the competition when I took that photo. My intention was to gather evidence for a confrontation. I never anticipated it would unravel like this, and I deeply regret it." "Didn't you inform her that the bar had been broken into and was closed?" she inquired. "I did, but looking back, I realized she heard but chose not to heed. I should have recognized it as her way of signaling the end of our marriage. Melody was always shielded by our father, as was I. Mandy believes I needed to experience parenthood to grasp the sacrifices he made. I strive to instill those values in my children. Melody, even from a young age, lacked a sense of right and wrong. That trait persists, and I can't say I wish I had noticed it sooner." "I often think about your parents," I admitted. "Few can claim their father-in-law as one of their closest friends." As Mandy reached her sister's carnal garments, she requested sewing scissors, which I promptly supplied before packing Melody's underwear. She cut out the lap and between the cups of the bras, perhaps sending a message to her sister. All the altered items were tossed into a box. I appreciated her gesture, as I couldn't bring myself to do it. It took us roughly 4 hours to complete half of the task. I suggested treating her to lunch before resuming, and she agreed, taking me to a new Chinese restaurant named Yumi's, offering an impressive array of food at a reasonable price. We arrived just as the lunch rush was winding down and encountered Payne on his way out, sporting 2 black eyes, a broken nose, and swollen lips. My father-in-law had certainly made an impact.
"Mandy, my father did that to him," she exclaimed. "It'll take 2 months for it to heal. An eyewitness told me that your dad only hit him 3 times before they intervened."
"From the looks of Payne, my dad still packs a punch," I remarked, surprising Mandy. "If they hadn't stopped him, would Payne be in the hospital?" "I'm not sure," I replied, stepping out of the car. As we approached the restaurant entrance, Payne emerged and urged Mandy to unblock Melody.
"Payne, have you met my brother-in-law, Caleb?" she asked.
I stepped forward, and Payne's face paled as he realized I was the one driving Melody's car. He raised his fist, preparing for a fight. "If that's how you want it, Payne, fine. Mandy will confirm you started it," I said. As soon as she agreed, I swiftly kicked him in the groin, then punched him twice. I unleashed a flurry of punches until he collapsed, then delivered a final blow to finish it. Feeling a release, I escorted Mandy inside where we were seated. I ordered unsweetened tea, and she opted for a cola. "Before we eat, did my daddy teach you those moves?" Mandy inquired. "Not exactly, but it's part of my job to handle trouble when needed," I explained. "I didn't want a fair fight. I wanted to end it quickly." As Mandy and I filled our plates, my phone rang. It was Melody, but I chose not to answer. "I think her boyfriend already gave her a call," I remarked. "Too bad he won't be giving her anything soon." Mandy burst into laughter, drawing attention. I vowed not to joke with her in public again. "That was hilarious. I almost peed myself," she chuckled. "I'm glad you didn't." "How would you explain it to Jack? I might have yelled flash flood," I teased. "Stop it," she said, laughing once more. After lunch, we resumed packing until 5 o'clock when we unloaded at Jack's storage unit. I paid the deposit and rent, leaving the keys with the owner. I texted Melody to update her. My insurer called with a low offer for my totaled truck, so I requested a replacement with similar mileage. This would cost them more in the long run. Returning home, Carrie and Susan were waiting. I introduced them to Mandy as Melody's colleagues and invited everyone inside. Mandy informed Jack of the situation, and we all relaxed with some beers. "We stopped by to check on you," Carrie said, "and to see if you'd like to join us for dinner," added Susan. "Several people had a rough day at work," she continued. "Payne was seriously injured this morning and went to the hospital this afternoon. Melody was apartment hunting during lunch. I can't say I feel sorry for any of them," Mandy replied. "We spent the day moving Melody's stuff into storage. Caleb let me pack her underwear, making it easy access for her future lovers. I notified the company via email about Payne and Melody's misconduct," Carrie Ann explained. "Attached was a picture of Payne's face after Melody's father caught them. I made it clear that office romances, especially long-term affairs, were unacceptable." "Do you hate my sister that much?" asked Mandy. "No, I dislike her behavior. I come from a family where we're responsible for our actions," Carrie replied. "If we did something good, we were praised. If we did something bad, we faced consequences. I just think they got away with it for too long." I excused myself to take a call from the bar. Later, Carrie filled me in on what I missed. "So, Carrie Ann, how long have you been in love with Caleb?" asked Mandy sincerely. "The night I met him, he discovered his wife's affair," Carrie recounted. "I saw him control his anger until he left the scene. Instead of confronting her publicly, he deflated her tires. He didn't want me involved, showing his consideration. He was prepared to face consequences alone. We talked that night. He didn't curse or humiliate her. He sought evidence to explain gently to his father-in-law why Melody didn't want children." "Caleb has always been empathetic," Mandy added. "He acts as a peacemaker in family issues, despite his own pain. You have my approval, but if you hurt him, I won't hesitate to act." "When your father found out about Melody and Payne, he came here to be with Caleb," Carrie revealed. "Did you know he sent the text that ended their marriage?" "No, I didn't. That explains why they didn't discuss our attempt to reconcile," Mandy responded. "Call Jack and the kids to meet us at the bar," I instructed. "I'm making dinner for everyone, including Susan and Carrie. Give me a moment to change." Upon returning, I found Mandy gone and Susan in the kitchen. Carrie had cleaned up, and we exchanged appreciative words. "I like your sister-in-law," Carrie remarked. "I think we'll be good friends." "She speaks highly of you too," I replied. As she embraced me, we shared a moment that hinted at what was to come. Walking hand in hand, we headed to the car, sharing smiles with Susan. Carrie took the front seat, and I sat in the back with a sense of anticipation. Susan remarked on our slow progress, Carrie said. We're taking small steps until we sort out this mess. I want to be a stay-at-home mom with a husband who shares my values. Arriving at Baithia's house together, Mandy's children greeted us enthusiastically. Mandy mentioned how well I connect with her daughters, often calming them down. I noted the need for more bar stools. Mandy parked the truck at her husband's store. The shepherd's pie received praise, even from older patrons. Carrie, seated next to me, shared a dessert made by the chef. Carrie tasted my drink, surprised to find it was non-boozelic. She whispered teasingly, and I responded with a promise I made to myself about not drinking before opening the bar. Tears welled in her eyes, and she looked proud. My assistant reported increased sales at the bar and over $1,000 in food sales. I paid my bill with my debit card, emphasizing the importance of honesty to my employees. Not everyone agrees, Carrie said, but if you think about it, it adds up. I left a 20% tip when settling the bill, then Susan and Carrie drove me home. Opening my email, I found a video from a bartender named Jack, showcasing the events of Saturday night. It was titled Surviving University Night and featured Melody and Payne. The video included legally witnessed contracts and was now for sale on an adult site. I texted Carrie the update, noting that Melody would ensure her parents never saw it. Later, Carrie arrived, noticeably transformed. I'm stunned, I managed to say. Who are you, and what have you done with my Carrie Ann? Do you like it? Carrie responded. I've transformed my appearance for good. Your message allows me to explain. I've been working undercover as an investigator for the FDA within Richards Dental Supply Corporation for over 2 years, Carrie Ann revealed. They've been selling contaminated materials from China, hiding their sources through multiple companies. Most buyers unknowingly have lead in their dental products. Payne, with a history of stalking married women, poses a threat to Melody. And then I came along and diverted your attention, I interjected. Is Susan also an agent? I asked. Yes, she is. We met in college while studying accounting, Carrie explained. Before we proceed, I need you to pass the video and any related information to my FBI contact. The bartender at New City, Jack, is involved in similar activities as Melody and Payne. Your input could help dismantle their operation. We sent it jointly. I poured her a glass of white wine and grabbed a cold beer for myself. As we chatted, her phone rang. She said it was my mom. I offered her privacy, but she declined, so I put it on speakerphone. Hi, Mom. Looks like you got my message, Carrie said, smiling. Did you really say you were leaving the FDA? Her mom asked. Yes, Susan and I will wrap up this week, then start our own firm, Carrie explained. We'll testify when needed, but plan to stay local for now. We've been urging you to settle down for years. Why now? Her mom inquired. Mom, why did you move back home? Carrie laughed. Okay, Mom, Carrie said. I met someone who's piqued my interest enough to consider settling. Is this the Caleb you've mentioned? Asked Carrie's mother. Mom, that's enough. Goodbye, Carrie said, ending the call. Empty nest syndrome, right? I joked. Tomorrow, I have a divorce lawyer appointment. Susan and I are leaving Richards, Carrie disclosed. The FDA is stepping in on Wednesday. They want us out before executing warrants, even though they already know where to look. Carrie left around 1 a.m. Tuesday. I sorted the rental car with the insurance company, then headed to the lawyer's office to start the divorce process. I was the first to arrive at her place that day. She asked for proof, so I recounted the entire story and let her listen to my conversation with my father-in-law. I also provided printouts from the Ramada Inn. It would strengthen our position if she agrees to my proposed settlement, I explained. We should arrange a meeting with her and her attorney to show them what's on this flash drive. It depicts what occurred last Saturday night with their consent. I've even forwarded the email confirming it. What makes you certain she won't contest this? My feminist lawyer inquired. Take the flash drive home and watch the 2-hour video alone. I keep the business, she gets the house. No alimony, I suggested. And if she refuses, she pressed. Then every family member will receive a copy anonymously, I stated, rising to leave. Caleb, she sighed, can you always be this ruthless? Only when someone's actions leave me no alternative, I responded. She made me realize the last 12 years of my life were largely wasted, I reflected. Meanwhile, Carrie and Susan resigned in person from their employer's office. Melody, the office manager, was stunned by their departure. Filling their roles would pose a challenge. Payne, visibly injured, spent the day in his office fielding calls from headquarters. Aware his position was secure due to family ties, he agreed to cover the cost of 2 company cars from his own pocket. It was made clear he must either marry the woman or terminate her employment post-divorce. After quitting my lawyers, I went to a real estate broker I knew. I wanted to find out what office buildings were for sale in the area. One of them, he thought, could be a gold mine if the new owner could find a respectable anchor. It was only 5 blocks to downtown from the Baicha store on Bedia. It was now owned by the bank I was dealing with. He said he thought the bank was getting tired of wearing it with a little facelift, interior painting, and landscaping. The 3-story building could be cleaned up quickly and attract attention. After looking him over, I agreed. We went back to his office and wrote up a proposal with a low price contingent on getting financing and inspection approval. I asked him if I could show the potential client a space that I thought would be perfect for him. He gave me the keys and told me to bring it in tomorrow around 2 p.m. I texted, "Could you and Susan swing by the bar? I need to show you both something," she quickly said. "Sure." I called my father-in-law and asked if he had an hour or two to spare. He asked me why. I explained that I was afraid I had to sell the bar to settle the divorce case and needed to start getting ready for a fresh start. I had an office building I was considering, and I wanted his opinion. He agreed, and I picked him up. We walked through the building checking out the electrical. He pointed out a few things that the building inspector wouldn't notice but could be used as bargaining chips. He asked what they were asking for. I told him and then disclosed what I was offering. "Smart move," he said. "You can always go up, but you can't go down. Personally, I think you should go for it. You need a couple of new anchors. Do you have someone in mind?" I said. "Just 2 ladies who are starting their own accounting firm, which is now working with Melody and me since I may be forced to sell Bazia." He grinned, offering, "If you secure it, I'll assist in renovating the space to accommodate both of you. It's more spacious than your current location with ample parking. Mandy speaks highly of them. She believes they're trustworthy." "Thanks, Dad," I acknowledged. "Do you reckon Melody will stake a claim on your business in the divorce?" he inquired. "The Melody I once knew probably won't, but the one I'm divorcing likely will," I responded. "She'll shift blame onto me to justify her actions." My father-in-law looked taken aback. "But that's not accurate. That's not what you and I know," I asserted. "Name one scenario, aside from a legal contract, where truth would influence a decision." "I can't. And neither can you in divorce proceedings. It all hinges on what the judge believes. If Melody and I had kids, I'd be doomed in any court's eyes," he lamented. "But it's unjust," he insisted. "Dad, we share your sentiment, but we're in the minority. We still cling to notions of right and wrong. Nowadays, most only prioritize themselves. The era when society benefited collectively is long gone," I remarked. "Evidence of that is the growing homelessness in California, the so-called promised land. For most, reality is what the media feeds them on a given day, and it's fleeting," I remarked. Later, at the bar, my realtor informed me that they accepted the offer but wouldn't provide financing, despite my loyalty. I began seeking financing through LendingTree.com, providing my tax returns for the past 5 years to demonstrate my commitment. Susan, Carrie, and I strolled through the vacant ground floor of the building I aimed to purchase, formerly a call center. I outlined my vision for a new bar and restaurant, then inquired about their office space requirements. "We can't afford the finishing costs," Susan admitted. "That's why we're seeking move-in ready options." Determined, I resolved to cover the expenses myself and develop the space as the bar gains traction. "I'll know about financing by Friday. I anticipate acquiring the building below its appraised value," I assured them. "Melody's dad will assist with construction, reducing expenses significantly." "Why go through all this?" Carrie questioned. "The court might compel me to sell Baitya as part of the divorce settlement, so I'm planning ahead," I explained candidly. "Draft your needs for the next 2 years," I instructed. "I'll proceed from there." Susan raised another possibility. "What if you don't need to sell the bar?" "My assistant's promotion and my surgeries necessitate contingency planning," I replied, wincing at Wednesday's pain. Melody, accompanied by her parents and the FDA, made rounds to all regional offices and headquarters. She received a copy of my divorce petition, citing infidelity. By Friday, Melody and Payne departed for Richard's headquarters, finalizing the deal. I managed to secure an additional $250,000 for remodeling. We commenced interior renovation on the ground floor, stripping it down to concrete walls and essentials. Our draftsman crafted detailed plans, incorporating an elevator shaft for 3 floors and additional plumbing for Carrie and Susan's section. Contractors installed 2 entrances, one from the street and another from the main lobby. I had to excavate concrete for a new elevator shaft and erect an interior concrete wall simultaneously. Carrie and Susan flew to Washington every Sunday, returning Friday, assisting as much as possible. Negotiations between my soon-to-be ex's lawyer and mine were futile. Fed up, I arranged a meeting between all parties, prepared for confrontation. After completing the elevator shaft, I sandblasted the building to restore its original color and refresh the red brick. The crew upgraded the flat roof, then turned to interior renovations. Her office featured restrooms, a lunchroom, a reception area, and 6 offices. Mine included public restrooms, a storage area, and a band platform with a dance floor. Contractors completed her section. Within 2 weeks, 2 more office buildings were acquired nearby. 2 were sold and converted into a new Bank of America branch. The local paper heralded neighborhood redevelopment. My meeting with my ex and her lawyer was set for Friday. The kitchen equipment arrived and was set up on the white tile floor. An oak bar counter was constructed and dark pine laminate flooring was laid. Electrical work was completed on both sides. Tables, chairs, and restaurant booths were ordered and scheduled for delivery on Monday. All of this was accomplished in less than 2 months. My real estate agent secured a long-term tenant, a legal team occupying the 2nd and 3rd floors, covering mortgage, taxes, and associated expenses. At a meeting with my attorney, Melody revealed her desire for me to embrace fatherhood. I listened to her claims, skeptically laughing at her assertion of still being on birth control when conception occurred. I proposed a DNA test to validate her claim, then instructed my attorney to reveal the contents of the stick I provided. Melody paled upon learning it had over 2 million hits, each generating $99. As legally married partners at the time, I asserted entitlement to 5% of proceeds from her one-night adventure, a marital asset. I gave her the weekend to propose a fair agreement. Otherwise, I threatened to make the contents of the disc public on Tuesday. The room fell silent. "I know who the father of your child is, Melody, and his name is Payne," I stated firmly before heading for the door. "You made your choice. Face the consequences and accept them." 10 minutes later, my divorce attorney called Caleb with Melody's offer. $350,000 in exchange for keeping his business and house, under the condition of silence about certain matters and relinquishing rights to the movie. "Draw up the settlement agreement," Caleb instructed, "but hold on to the funds until I'm satisfied." "When will the divorce be finalized?" Caleb inquired, eager to move forward. "I'll schedule a court date now, but it won't be legal until 30 days after the judge approves," the attorney explained. Dressed sharply, Caleb awaited Carrie and Susan's arrival at the airport with roses in hand. Red for Carrie, yellow for Susan. Their faces lit up as they saw him, and he greeted them with checks in hand, symbolizing their financial agreements. With luggage in tow, they headed to Caleb's new sedan, purchased with a cash settlement he found acceptable. "Before heading home, I want to show you your finished offices," Caleb informed them. "The rest of the building is rented by a group of lawyers." Carrie inquired about the losses incurred, to which Caleb replied with a laugh, confirming it was indeed significant. In a subsequent meeting with their lawyers, Caleb presented evidence of Melody's earnings from the video, arguing that since it was filmed during their marriage, he was entitled to 50% of the income. Carrie shed tears of relief as I explained our new situation. I would retain my business, my house, and receive an additional $350,000. She had a week to remove any furniture she wanted from the house. "What are your plans for the house?" she asked. "I'll sell it," I replied. "I don't want past memories to hinder our future." Tears of joy streamed down Carrie's face. "Susan, you're still as slow as molasses in January," Susan remarked. "It took you over 2 months to express what I knew the night we met Mandy and her family. But when you finally do, you do it right." Even Susan, typically reserved, became emotional when she saw their newly approved offices. The warm, professional space, adorned with oak and pastel colors, impressed them. "All that's left is to name the business, register it, and purchase office equipment and furniture," I said with a smile. "You ladies have a good eye for colors," Carrie said, embracing me. "I love you, finally." I nodded and kissed her, signaling an end to holding back. Later, I accompanied Susan to Carrie's house, where they both now lived. It was Carrie's first time traveling home with me. We spent hours opening up to each other and catching up. After breakfast at our favorite deli, I took her to Gerard's to look at rings. She found one she loved but hesitated at the price. I insisted on buying it, envisioning it as a future gift for our daughter's 16th birthday. Even the salesperson was moved as she processed the sale. The first person Carrie called to share the news was Susan. We agreed to meet at Baisha Restaurant on Batia, at 6 o'clock. I suggested she invite her parents, eager for them to meet the man who convinced them to return home. I called Daniel, my former father-in-law, and his wife, whom I always addressed as Mom and Dad, inviting them over. They happily accepted. I shared with them that Melody and I reached a divorce agreement, set for next week. Learning that Melody and Payne had announced their engagement, yet hadn't spoken, I asked Mandy to bring the whole family. I arranged for the chef to prepare a special meal, explaining the occasion. He promised a traditional Irish lamb stew and cedar cookies, adding his own twist. The bartender was instructed to serve Irish coffee with fresh cream, except for me. Unexpectedly, a private table was reserved for us at the back of the restaurant for added privacy. Daniel and Mary, my in-laws, arrived first, allowing me to introduce Carrie to them. The surprise came when Carrie's well-known parents, Bob and Roseanne Lasher, joined us. It seemed Daniel kept them informed while at work. When Jack and Mandy arrived, their young children rushed to me, aged 4 and 3, embracing me tightly. Carrie opened her arms, and the younger ones gravitated toward her. During a lavish dinner, we shared the news that Carrie got her ring, stunning everyone with its size. Carrie explained how it happened and my response, bringing her mother to tears and earning approval from relatives. When Carrie said it was fine for me to call them Mom and Dad, I assured them they would always be Mom and Dad to me. The exceptional food delighted us as always. When the bill came, Carrie's father insisted on covering it. Despite wanting to protest, a nudge from Carrie stopped me. After everyone left except her parents, we recounted our story in detail. Bob asked why I never drank Irish coffee. Carrie explained my policy of abstaining from booze in my own establishments to set an example for employees. Impressed, Bob joked that our restaurant was fit for his daughter and friend, then praised the office design and my principles. Daniel regarded me as the son he never had, seeing me as someone who stands firm in his values. Off the record, Daniel is the father figure I never had. Growing up in a poor household without a father, my mother raised me and my sister alone after he left before they were even married. Meeting Daniel through Melody, I found him to be tough, street smart, and unyielding, yet always principled. He taught me invaluable lessons about strength and integrity, shaping who I am today. Daniel is my father not by blood, but by choice, and I owe much of my moral compass to him. We stood in silence until the ladies returned, and then Carrie's father spoke. Expressing approval of our relationship, he welcomed me into their family, a gesture that left Carrie in shock as he had never before approved of anyone. We spent the night together, and it was hard to see her leave. Susan and Carrie aimed to leave the FDA on good terms. I listed the house on Monday, signed the divorce agreement Wednesday, and received the trust funds. Friday, I watched the judge finalize the divorce. Melody didn't show. I picked up my assistant and showed him the new bar layout. He agreed to manage it for $75,000 a year, plus a 10% bonus based on net income. Charlie's Bar and Grill was born. 3 years later, Corbett and Sullivan accounting firm thrived, while Charlie's Bar and Grill became a local favorite. Meanwhile, Melody and Payne's marriage crumbled in court as she caught him with her best friend. Despite this, her family remained distant. The birth of our twins brought joy amid life's challenges. Carrie playfully named me during labor pains, and we proudly introduced our red-haired babies to our relatives.
My name is Sarah, and I am 34 years old. My husband, Tom, is 27. During our dating years, the age gap wasn't something we noticed much, that it became more apparent once we decided to marry. When I first met his parents, I was struck by their rural home in the Northeast and their deeply conservative views. They were initially very resistant to our relationship because of our age difference. I remember their disapproval vividly, with comments like, "They say an older wife is a rare find, but 7 years is quite a lot. Can Sarah even have children at her age? Won't her eggs be too old?" Such remarks could easily alienate most women. While the father-in-law was merely rude, the mother-in-law was outright hostile. She declared, "I refuse to accept this. Why does Tom need to marry someone 7 years older? It's too embarrassing to even discuss with the neighbors. He'll soon be back here to take over the family business, and with your city background, you're simply not suited to be our daughter-in-law. Tom and I had been together for 6 years, and I had devoted nearly all my late 20s to him. I was committed to marrying him, and after living together for a few years, I didn't have the energy to search for someone else. In my frustration, I pushed Tom into proposing, and he reluctantly agreed. Perhaps due to his youth or just his nature, he seemed to prefer keeping things as they were. When his parents opposed our engagement, he quickly shifted his stance, saying, "See, I told you it was too soon to get married. We can just register our marriage later." I responded firmly, "It's not too soon. The age difference will not change no matter how much time passes." Turning back to his parents with a polite smile, I said, "Yes, I am older than Tom, but that's something beyond our control. I promise to do my best to prove myself as a worthy daughter-in-law. I'm not perfect, but I hope you can accept me." Though they agreed with some reluctance, Tom's sister was adamantly opposed. At our first meeting, she bluntly declared, "Just so you know, don't refer to me as your sister-in-law. It's completely unacceptable for my brother to marry someone older than me." Looking back, I realize I was naive, yet with the confidence of someone who had navigated difficult clients in my work, I believed I could handle it. I now understand what they call rude bullying. I convinced myself that moving back to the countryside to live with the in-laws was not as bad as the horror stories I had read online. I should have called off the wedding at that point, but as they say, hindsight is 20/20. Now, a year later, I deeply regret getting married. Although our daily life and work routines didn't change much after we registered our marriage, one major shift was the frequent phone calls Tom started receiving from his mother. I could only guess what they were about, likely questioning when we would move back home and probably urging him to consider divorce. Whenever Tom received calls from his mother, he would retreat to another room or the bathroom, trying to shield me from overhearing. But with our small apartment, it was impossible not to catch snippets of the conversation. I often heard phrases like, "So, Sarah was saying," and couldn't help but listen in. It seemed they were accusing me of opposing the idea of moving back to Tom's hometown to live with his parents, but that wasn't true. When I asked Tom about moving back, he expressed reluctance, saying he didn't want to live somewhere without a nearby convenience store and where job opportunities were scarce. It seemed he was using me as a scapegoat for his own unwillingness to return home. It was frustrating to see Tom cast me as the villain to cover up his own hesitations. Just now, I overheard Tom in the next room saying, "So if I bring up divorce, I'd have to pay alimony, right?" His hesitation about divorce wasn't rooted in any lingering affection for me but rather in his aversion to paying alimony. Hearing his true feelings was disheartening. It might be time to seriously consider divorce. Although we don't have children, I began contemplating it privately without mentioning it to anyone. Shortly after, I received a call about Tom's sister's upcoming wedding, prompting us to take the express train back to his family's home for the ceremony. Despite Tom being considered the heir, our wedding had been a modest family dinner, while his sister's wedding was set to be a lavish event. I wanted to fulfill my social obligations and avoid any further fallout on our part despite the disparity. The wedding was scheduled for the middle of a 3-day weekend, so Tom and I arrived at his family's home the day before. Tom's sister's fiancé is from a neighboring city, and the wedding was set to take place at a venue there, with plans for the relatives to travel by chartered bus on the day of the event. As the family home became a hub for relatives, they began arriving in droves. The ceremony was set for just after 2 p.m. To avoid overcrowding the venue's dressing rooms, the venue staff, hairdressers, and dressers came to the house, and even Tom's parents were getting dressed up. Our own wedding had been more of a simple family dinner, so we wore slightly nicer everyday clothes. The contrast in treatment was stark and surprising. I had changed into the dress I had splurged on for the occasion, done my makeup, and was setting my hair when my father-in-law called out, "Hey, Sarah, could you serve some refreshments to the relatives?" With a smile, I began handing out refreshments, introducing myself with, "Nice to meet you. I'm Tom's wife. Please enjoy the refreshments," and trying to make my presence felt with the poise of a seasoned TV announcer. Despite my mother-in-law's suggestion to stay in Tom's room, I was eager to fulfill my role and make a good impression. I was determined to make a positive impression. Shortly after, the bus arrived to take us to the wedding venue. The relatives boarded with excitement, and as I prepared to join them, my mother-in-law called out, "Wait a minute, Sarah, I forgot the pearl necklace. Could you go get it?" "Really, in this formal dress?" I asked. She insisted, "It's in the drawer on top of the dresser in my room. It's a keepsake from my mother. Please hurry and bring it." "Understood, I'll look for it now," I replied. I hurried to my mother-in-law's room and began searching through the cluttered dresser drawer. The necklace wasn't immediately visible, and with everyone else already on the bus, I started to feel anxious. After about 5 minutes, I found a box that looked promising. I opened it quickly and dashed to the entrance, only to see that the bus had already left. The entire family, including Tom, had departed without me. "You've got to be kidding," I exclaimed, rubbing my eyes in disbelief. The bus was nowhere in sight. I panicked, realizing I'd left my cell phone in my bag, which had already been loaded onto the bus. I knew the venue's name but didn't have the phone number. Without my phone, I couldn't reach Tom, and without my wallet, I couldn't even get a taxi. What was I going to do? For a moment, I felt a wave of despair, but then I thought, do I even need to go to the wedding? My enthusiasm for the event had completely evaporated. It wasn't just my first time meeting the relatives. Surely my in-laws and Tom must have noticed I wasn't on the bus. Their departure without me seemed unnecessarily cruel. The idea of divorce crossed my mind, but simply ending the marriage seemed too easy. I wanted revenge. After some contemplation, I devised a plan. I stepped outside with a calm demeanor and a smile, preparing to execute my scheme. When the relatives, in-laws, and Tom returned from the wedding around 5 p.m., they were visibly drunk. By then, I had gathered all my belongings except for the bag that had gone with them. I found a taxi company's number in a phone book next to the in-laws' home phone and called, requesting a taxi to pick me up in 30 minutes. Everything was set. I greeted them at the bus with an innocent expression. Tom's face showed guilt when he saw me, but he didn't say a word. My in-laws ignored me, preoccupied with sending off the relatives. The relatives glanced my way but left in their cars. I wished Tom would at least offer an apology, but that's just how he was. With a forced smile, I said to Tom, "Welcome back." He looked visibly relieved and began making excuses. "I didn't realize you weren't on the bus." I felt bad, but the ceremony was starting, so I couldn't come back for you. I ignored his excuses and started searching through the luggage for my bag, silently conveying my disbelief. I turned to him and said, "Divorce? Is this some kind of joke? Because it certainly feels like one." When Tom realized what I had said, he began to panic. "Who knows? I'm surprised you think such a petty lie would work. So what if you weren't noticed? Are you saying you forgot I existed until you saw me?" While both of his parents were awful, the real disappointment was Tom. He was left speechless, unable to defend himself. Then my father-in-law, after sending off the relatives, chimed in. "Come on, it was just a little forgetfulness on both sides. Tom's talking about divorce over something like this. City brides are really spineless." It seemed he was actually in favor of the divorce. My mother-in-law, upon hearing about it, smirked and said, "I knew it. A city bride just doesn't fit in. She was never right for our family." Her hypocrisy infuriated me. If that was how they felt, they should have just invited Tom to the wedding alone. Why make me travel all this way only to leave me behind? Anyone would be outraged by such treatment, whether they're a city bride or a country bride. When I shouted, my mother-in-law shouted back, "We never intended to invite you in the first place. There wasn't even a seat prepared for you. Tom brought you along by mistake, so we left you behind." I was shocked by her audacity. As I glared, Tom quickly looked away and shifted the blame to his mother, saying, "Well, Mom didn't explicitly say to come alone, so I assumed it meant as a couple." My mother-in-law's unreasonable anger continued. "And why did you go around serving tea and introducing yourself as the bride at the venue?" Relatives were asking why the wife didn't show up, not realizing Tom was even married. It made us look foolish. "That's your own fault, and it's absurd to say I shouldn't introduce myself," I retorted. It seemed my effort to introduce myself as Tom's wife to the relatives had made an impact. "So you never intended to acknowledge me and planned to divorce me eventually. That's why you kept our wedding a secret from the relatives and made it seem like just a dinner party." Neither my father-in-law nor my mother-in-law responded, but their silence confirmed my suspicions. It was clear to me that severing ties with this family was the right decision. "Fine, I'll grant your wish and divorce you. I'm better off without a hostile family and an unreliable husband." I boarded the taxi that had just arrived and took the last train back to my apartment. Unable to sleep that night, I impulsively searched for lawyers online and began packing my belongings. I kept myself busy until dawn. When I finally woke up late the next day, I found several missed calls from Tom and my in-laws. It seemed my revenge had made its mark. After being left behind, I came up with a plan for revenge, but I wanted to keep it within the bounds of safety and legality. I didn't want to just divorce and suffer in silence without making a statement. I recalled how concerned my mother-in-law was about the neighbors' opinions. There was a surplus of refreshments and snacks she had bought for the relatives, so I decided to use them. I bagged up the leftover treats and set out around the neighborhood, greeting everyone with a smile. "Hello, I'm Tom's wife," I announced and proceeded to share everything about how I had been treated and left behind on the wedding day. That evening, my mother-in-law and I had a loud argument outside. Naturally, the entire neighborhood heard, a perfect form of revenge for a family so worried about their public image. Afterward, Tom and I divorced without any major complications. The stories I shared were framed as casual conversations, so I wasn't sued for defamation. With the help of a lawyer, I was able to claim compensation for the abandonment and secure a satisfactory settlement. As for my sister-in-law, her marriage quickly unraveled. She had concealed her difficult personality to get married, but people rarely change. Her true nature emerged, and the marriage soured rapidly. Within 6 months, she had divorced and moved back to her parents' home. By then, the incident of my abandonment had become a notorious rumor. Eventually, the in-laws gained a reputation as a vile family that mistreated their daughter-in-law, leading to a much more subdued existence. Tom's prospects of finding a new bride in his hometown seemed bleak. I learned all this from a neighbor I had befriended and exchanged phone numbers with. It felt like perfect justice for me. The divorce felt like a new beginning. I regretted not recognizing the true nature of Tom and his family sooner, but now I had a clear perspective. Perhaps I should have withdrawn immediately when faced with their initial opposition, but I was young and naive. I don't want to disregard the happy moments we shared, so I see the past year as a valuable lesson for my future. I'm relieved to have resolved the situation and moved on.